Peace, peace, greetings to you all. It's your brother Nyhiem, BKA Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Fam, we welcome back. Welcome back. You know, we took a little break, we took a little hiatus. Make sure y'all hit that like button first and foremost. Click like, share the video out. We're gonna have a discussion tonight. I'm about to bring my brothers on, and we're gonna do a book review of Roy Beck's book, The Back of the Hiring Line. Powerful piece of information. So let me bring my brothers in, brother Ibrahim and brother Josh. I want to do a announcement for the family first. I want to share first and foremost, we have gotten February 15th, today, Freedmen Recognition Day in the city of Athens, Georgia. We have several more proclamations coming from state level and city level all across the country. I just want to share with y'all one of the images. This is myself and the mayor of Athens, Georgia, getting that proclamation signed. We had a great meeting. He shared some resources with me that I can utilize for the organization. Today, also at the Athens Clark County Library, well, they had a lecture. And guess what the lecture was on, family? It was on the Freedmen's Bureau. Most of the resources that they shared, I was already familiar with, but there were others that I wasn't familiar with. I was like, okay, this is great. So now, for me personally, and the work that I have to do out in my location in the surrounding vicinity, I have a place to whereas I can bring our mission statement closer to fruition, which is doing a lineage trace, or helping our people, I should say, find their families in these records. It makes disaggregation much more easy for us, and to have such a proclamation issued, to have Freedmen Day recognized this February the 15th, which also fell on a day that the same city
was doing a lecture on the Freedmen's Bureau. It is Providence, family. The ancestors are moving with us. And, you know, we're leading on and victory is sure. So I want to give a shout out to everybody that's in attendance, everybody that will be in attendance. Shout out to all the BTP mods and members. BTP Riri, I see you. Sister Kelly Pryor, XXX Sister Faye X, Brother LD Ward, peace was going on. Sister Shanna Kim, Vince Jefferson, Brother Dre, peace was good, fam. And everybody else that I may have missed. So big things are happening. Big things are happening. We've been busy since we've been away. So before we open this thing up, Brother Ibrahim, Brother Josh, did y'all want to share anything before we start getting into this book?
Go ahead, Ibrahim.
No, I would just like to, congratulate the city of Athens for the historic day today. Great work in initiating that, Nyhiem. Hopefully, other great things will come from that.
Oh, honors, brother, honors, definitely, definitely. It's just a step, right? We have something called Operation Proclamation. We are blowing the quickening breath on certain things and reviving them in this freedman spirit. And we will win, family. We will win. Everything is lining up for the freedmen. Make no mistake about it. Everything is lining up for the freedmen, and I'm elated. And I can't wait to dig into this book tonight. We're going to do 2 parts. We're going to go into tonight. We're going to go in tomorrow night as well, because there's so much to cover. On the 22nd, we will be interviewing the author of the book, Roy Beck. So y'all definitely want to make sure y'all have y'all calendars marked for that date. We're going to do what we do. We're going to do what we do. Peace, Vyasa Nicola Gullah, and peace to everybody that's joining. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to start by just getting into this book. When we do these book reviews, I don't necessarily start at the front of the book. I start with the quote that I think not only captures the book, but captures the reason why we want to do this book. So again, I don't know if y'all can see that light. My ring light is kind of bright, but Roy Beck's back of the hiring line, a 200-year history of immigration surges, employer bias, and depression of Black wealth. This was a masterful, masterful book. I was reading it and I was looking for that angle, right? We see people and sometimes when they come from what's called the right wing in America, there's always this angle of pandering. And I was looking for it through the whole book. I was like, okay, I'm all the way at chapter 20, 21. So I haven't really found that thing yet. Roy Beck, he went in on this, family. And like I said, over the next 2 nights, we are going to really dig into this work. So I want to start with page 14. It's a powerful quote. It says, "This has been a story of interruptions. Each time it looked like the American people, through their elected government, were going to open the door for far more opportunity for African Americans. Sustained spikes in immigration at least partially closed it, abolished slavery, but then allowed the great wave of immigration, end legalized segregation, but then begin quadrupling the foreign labor competition." I'm getting a little tongue-tied. I'm excited to be back tonight, fam. Excuse me. Peace, Looney. I see you in the building. So I'm gonna start. We're gonna start at the beginning, of course, and I want to go into a quote by Frederick. Now, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'll get into some of the intro, right? So he says on page 4, this is a little told story that helps explain one of the most troubling questions in 21st century America: why the descendants of slavery have average wealth that is only a fraction of wealth for other races and ethnic groups. In late 2020, for example, more than 150 years after the Civil War, the Census Bureau reported that the net assets of the median Black household were less than 6% that of the median white household. 6%, he emphasizes in his book. This level of inequality contains threatening ramifications for our entire national society. That sentence is key. This level of inequality contains threatening ramifications for our entire national society. In a book a quarter century ago, I wrote, "The uncompleted agenda of economic and political equality of opportunity for the descendants of American slavery ranks as perhaps our most troubling and pervasive national agony. No social problem seems untouched by the acrimony of racial recriminations that rises out of the failure to end the massively disproportionate presence of Blacks in poverty. Despite a thriving large population of well-educated, well-paid, highly productive Black Americans, 1/3 of the total Black population, seems intractably stuck in poverty. And the number has been increasing throughout most of this era of rising immigration. Not much has improved since then." So he wrote this 25 years ago. So we see where this term, descendants of American slavery, comes from. Start tracing certain individuals' roots in this political space, and you'll uncover some things as you go along. So we see where this name comes from, first and foremost. But he wrote this 25 years ago. In this book, he is highlighting that it's not necessarily the immigrants' fault, but it's the fault of bad policy that was pushed and eventually passed by our Congress, our Senate, and signed by our president. This is a failure of government. That was my take from this book right here. That this immigration wave, 1 million a year over decades, 1 million a year, this was a failure of government. And it seemed intentional. And we're going to get into some of that. So, Brother Josh or Ibrahim, y'all want to share anything before we, start getting into, some more of this work? Okay.
I would just say one of the recurring themes in Beck's book is that immigration is not the barrier, it's one of the barriers, right? And this book just highlights the immigration portion. I mean, we all know the failure of Reconstruction, and everything that came along with that, and some of the other systematic barriers that we face, banking, housing, education, the things that deal with day-to-day life in America. But this book specifically focuses on the immigration aspect. So if anybody's just listening that, may be an immigrant or maybe, favor immigration, like this book is about immigration. So we'll be focusing specifically on how immigration impacted our rise or lack of, rise.
That's right. That's right. So Josh dropped off. Peace. BTP Corey is in the building. We had to take a little hiatus, bro. We had to get some things together. We had to go take over some of them Twitter space streets out there as well. Go do our thing. Honors. Just to camel back off of what Ibrahim said, I did a post on Twitter after I read this book, and it was a quote from Neo in The Matrix when he goes and meets the architect, and the architect basically is giving him, the truth and the options that he has, right? Either to save his girlfriend or save Zion. Well, no, save Zion by selecting, what was it, 16 females and 7 males, I believe it was. So yeah, save Zion. And in the course of their discussion, Neo says either no one else knows or no one has told me. That's what I felt about. That's how I felt after I read this book. I felt like there was a missing piece to all of the works that I have read, and this plugged it in. We have bookends of oppressive measures that have happened to us as freedmen in this country. And the immigration element of it is one that is not widely spoken of. The way Beck wrote this book, and it was not necessarily his thoughts. It's based on a whole bunch of studies. He has over 296 references in the back of the book. 296 of them. It's not just his thoughts. He just compiled all of the research into one place. And those of us that respect scholarship and the scholastic methodology, well, we respect that. But when it comes to our plight here as a people, this immigration thing is harmful. It has been harmful since slavery times. And it started to grow during Reconstruction. It started to metastasize in, you could say, the 60s and the 70s. Now it is a full-blown cancer on the body that is the freedmen or the American freedmen here in the United States of America. So I'm going to go through some of these quotes, and I want you all to, bear with me as I go through some of these things, and Brother Ibrahim, jump in at any time. Peace to anybody that I've missed in the chat as well. Make sure y'all hit that like button, share it out, support the platform. Y'all already know what it is. Cash App Be The Power. Y'all can use that super chat as well. If you are not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, family. Hit that little bell icon next to the subscription button so you can be notified every single time that we go live. So let's get back to the book. All right. So I'm going to, of course, we can't cover everything. So I'm going to bounce from quote to quote to quote, and we'll give some commentary. So this is from page 6. It says, the chief difficulties that African Americans have always faced during immigration surges were not triggered by who the immigrants were, but how many they were. When immigration has been a problem, it has not been about the composition of the hiring lines, but about the length of those lines. So I thought that somebody tried to, they starting already in the chat, y'all. They starting already. So the length of those lines, right? For those of you who are familiar with the series Martin, there's one where he's at the DMV and Sherman Hemsley, AKA George Jefferson, is the guy behind the counter at the DMV. And Martin finally gets up to the front and he forgets a few things. And Sherman Hemsley said, you got to go to the back of the line. And he said, where's the back of the line? And he point. And there's a sign above the door that says from scratch. With the surge of immigration in this country, along with everyday run-of-the-mill discrimination that we face, we as freedmen had to constantly go to the back of the lines. Every time we get closer. And most of the time when we got to the line, they discriminated against us. They gave loans to less qualified individuals on the basis of their skin tone alone. We had to go back to the back of the line. Then they brought in immigrants. We had to go back to the back of the line. Then they brought in black immigrants, favored them. They recognized them by their last names. We had to go further in back of the line, so much so that when we had a pandemic hit us starting in 2020, the spotlight elucidated the problems of the freedmen in America in a way that showed that only reparative justice can fix us, i.e. reparations, only. And that call grew. It became a cacophony from YouTube. I mean, I've read New York Times articles from straight up right wingers that had to consider reparations and rewrite why they were now for reparations after being against it, because there's absolutely no way for us to catch up. But tonight we're focusing on immigration, but the point is always having to go to the back of the line. It's not just the hiring line, it's every line. Yeah, go ahead, Ibrahim.
Beck talks about this extension of the line. And I thought it was key that he mentioned, it's not where the immigrants came from, it's the numerous amounts of immigrants, right? And we're talking about a people who just came out of slavery, right? People who just came out of the trades that built America. So we had all of the labor skills. There was nobody more qualified than work for us. So you take these unqualified people or people that's not as qualified and you move them to the front. And you take the qualified people or the people that had been qualified during the antebellum South and during a different political system in America, i.e. slavery, and you move them to the back. And you keep them back there so long that the newly skilled people was able to catch up and surpass us in certain trades.
That's right. That's right. And this, I wanted to focus on the ontology tonight, right? Of this immigration. Man, there's so many different names and superlatives that I can use, but I'm going to say this immigration problem. We have to call it what it is. It's a problem, and it's been a problem for us. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that later, insofar as the attitudes of many of the immigrants and how they feel towards us today. So let me see. I'm going to start on chapter 2. This is page 7. A quick walk through the history. He writes, in the 1820s in the North, well before the Civil War, more than 100,000 African Americans were free of slavery and in the labor force when the first waves of mass immigration swept over American shores. Historians find that employers immediately began to take advantage of the surplus labor and the larger choice of white employees whom they moved to the front of the hiring line. Black workers were systematically displaced over the next decades of spikes in immigration, mainly from Northern Europe. Ex-slave Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist orator, activist, and writer, lamented at the time, "The old employments by which we have heretofore gained our livelihood are gradually, and it may be inevitably, passing into other hands. Every hour sees the black man elbowed out of employment by some newly arrived immigrant whose hunger and whose color are thought to give him a better title to the place." That's powerful. We call Frederick Douglass our first freedman king. I have no party affiliation, but if I had to call myself by the name of any of these parties, I would call myself a Frederick Douglass Republican. because that's what he was, and that's what the original party was dedicated to. So if I had to call myself by any of these party names, it would be a Frederick Douglass Republican, who we call the first freedman king. And he has several remarks about this early immigration. You know, we've done some digging ever since we got this work, and we found a lot of things, and we're going to be talking about that over the next 2 days, over the next the next few months, actually, because we know what ails us, and we also know what the solutions are, and we're going to speak to some of that as well. On page 8, it says many ex-slaves advanced quickly. Now, you know what? Let me start here. Fortunately, after the Civil War ended in 1865, the industrializing North had a voracious appetite for additional workers. The more adventurous freed slaves in the South moved northward and gained footholds on the first rungs of occupation. Their labor was needed in the cities, even though most were illiterate ex-slaves with work experience that was almost entirely agricultural. Many ex-slaves advanced quickly into skilled occupations. By 1870, for example, 1/3 of all Black workers in Cleveland were in skilled jobs. In some towns and cities, they started businesses and worked their way into the police forces and even city councils. See, this is what happens when you have access to capital in this country, in a capitalist society. It continues. Entering on the ground floor of the post-war industrial expansion looked to be the equivalent of the 40 acres and a mule promised to ex-slaves in a formal end-of-war order by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman, but which was quickly annulled by President Andrew Johnson. Anybody new to our platform, go check out the book review we did on a book called The Bloody Shirt, Terror After Appomattox, I believe is the subtitle. I usually keep that book on my desk. Here it is. The Bloody Shirt, Terror After the Civil War, is the title. So another book that we also reviewed was Charles Blow's book, The Devil You Know. Another book that we didn't never do an official review on, but I mean, I guess you can say we have because we cited from it so much, was Dr. Sandy Darity and A. Kirsten Mullins' book, From Here to Equality. All of these pieces are interlocking. They're all interlocking. So when Beck notes that many ex-slaves advanced quickly into skilled occupations, and by 1870, for example, 1/3 of all Black workers in Cleveland, like these are people that left the North, that left the South, that went to the North looking for better opportunities. Better opportunities. And we're going to get into some of that later. On page 9, Beck notes, Black middle class of the North crumbled under the relentless flow of foreign labor. Remember, this book has 296 references in the back of it. And we urge you all to get this book and read it, study it. We elevate the information over here because we're looking for solutions to our problems. Looking for the solutions. So it continues. Bigotry was a luxury many Northern employers could not afford when they needed the labor of free Blacks. But with a larger and larger supply of European workers arriving throughout the North, employers began turning their backs on Black workers. Freed slaves stopped moving north. Many Blacks already there stopped progressing up job ladders and then were driven out of their jobs altogether. The Northern Black population declined as workers were forced to move back to the rural South in search of subsistence wages and former connections near or on the very plantations where they or their parents had once been enslaved. Lawrence Fuchs of Brandeis University wrote that, quote, it did not take Jim Crow laws to drive Blacks out of jobs in the North. mass immigration was enough. So, any bros, jump in on any of this. I don't want to just be, pedantic tonight and read, and we want to try to give some commentary to some of these.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some context to that. There's a great article by The Guardian, and it talks about, immediately after slavery. And it explains how immediately after slavery, blacks were dying due to starvation and illnesses. And so many had died. I believe about 1/3 of our population had died off. So we're talking about freedmen who desperately needed these jobs, right? Free people who was freed into this economic system with nothing, right? Bootless people. So you're in the South, you're dying on the side of the road, you're looking for some type of way to feed your family any way you can. You go north, and for a very brief time, there's a little relief, and then you have an influx of immigration come in, and now you're kind of like you're just there, and you're forced back into the South to the heinous conditions that you just came from, right? Not only slavery, but being a new freedman and not having any opportunity and just standing there, and starving to death.
That's right. So I want to get into a little bit of the policy. And Josh, if you want to jump in before I go in, just come through. I know you're probably a little busy at the moment, but just jump in. But I want to speak to some of the policy that he lists here, because I have so much highlighted, and I'm probably not going to be able to. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get through all of this stuff. But like I said, I don't want to just be pedantic tonight. I don't want to just read. I want to give some commentary, because I want to get into the broader discussions about modern day immigration and some of the solutions. I'm going to give y'all what I think. Y'all know me. I'm gonna keep it official with y'all. So, okay. So this is on page 11. Inequality shrinks during moderated immigrations. Historians have found that whenever policymakers in the past have reduced immigration, economic inequality was also reduced. A case in point was how the dramatic reductions in immigration in the 1920s led to great progress toward racial and economic equality in the mid-20th century. It was a time when inequality narrowed for all, but even more for African Americans. It's like, I guess what they say when white America catches a cold, black America gets COVID now, it's been revised. Well, I guess when America begins to heal, especially economically to some degree, maybe back in those days, then there was some healing for the freedmen as well.
Yeah, you have to emphasize on that. Before this mass influx of immigration, there was a study that just came out last week, and it really just focused on black men. And it says, like, even when American economic system is in a crunch, black man unemployment barely budges while everybody else does better. Even, freedmen women unemployment, shrinks to about average. So this was a period of time where, you extremely needed all hands on deck. So you went around and you got the people that you could to, perform the labors that you needed, right? And that's a good way to contrast, what this influx of immigration has done, especially to the freedman family, because even when the freedman woman is doing okay, if the freedman man is not, and this day and age we live in a society where you basically need 2 incomes per household, it just weighs us down. So that's one way to kind of look at the this great impact of mass immigration.
That's right. Excellent breakdown, brother. So, like I said, Josh, jump in whenever you can, brother. I want to. Oh, I thought I was muted. I want to start at page 12, right? So I'm going to read a little bit here, family. Y'all bear with me. There's some things that I've highlighted. I'm not going to read all of this, but we doing a book review, so there's going to be some reading. All right. Congress ended mass immigration. This is page 12, and moved to moderated immigration in 1924, with average annual immigration 2/3 lower the next 4 decades. Black Americans began an unprecedented march into the middle class. Tight labor, moderate immigration conditions during that time helped all Americans make impressive gains. According to research in the Journal of Economic Literature by James P. Smith and Finis R. Welch. And he has several bullet points here, and I'm going to list all 5 of them. I'm going to speak, all 5 of them. 1, real incomes of white males expanded 2.5 fold between 1940 and 1980. 2, for black men, real incomes expanded 4-fold, rapidly closing the gap between races. 3, the black middle class grew from 22% of African Americans to 71%. Starting with less than 1 out of every 4 black Americans in the middle class, there ended up being nearly 3 of every 4 in the middle class. 5, the number of middle class African Americans more than tripled. And there was some debate with the team over this particular portion of the book, right? Because we're so used to looking at numbers, particularly today's numbers. But we were able to dig into the study.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm gonna jump in. So yeah, we know the debate. We had a debate. It wasn't really a debate. It was just we were trying to get to the bottom of how it can make sense. All right. So really, my thing is how do we determine what is middle class? Like, what's the criteria for middle class? And a lot of times, the majority of people who are using the term middle class as some type of standard of living, that's pretty much the ideology behind that. Like, and they're using the metric of income. So they have the average income or income. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, bro.
Okay. They use average income or median income, and pretty much they try to say, well, okay, this is our metric for middle class, because do you look the part? Do you have the same thing that the average family or the middle family has? Do you have a house? Do you have a car? Do you have a job? Where you live and all this kind of stuff, right? But then, I don't think that I don't think that's the best metric for middle class, and because especially today, because we have to look at middle class in terms of wealth. If you're thinking about, do you have a job? Do you have a car? Where you living? You might not have any. You might be eating ketchup sandwiches. You might be uh uh got all kind of credit cards and got all kind of bills. When you lose your job, what happens? Is your whole life in shambles? Do you have to go back and try to live with family members? If something happens to your health, like that's so middle class. If we got to compare, we got to look at wealth. We got to look at what. That's how I think it. That's how I view things. And there was a great piece that Dr. Darity did a couple years ago, I think, and he put out, and it's called the subaltern middle class or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one that just came out too. I wish somebody would put the link in the chat. I'm on my phone right now, so I can't. I'm not a little mobile. But it's called I think going up the down escalator or something like that. Well, basically, we have to look at middle class in terms of, and I don't want to get off on a tangent. I know we need to stay focused on the book. But when we think of middle class, it needs to be about the wealth position of our people. And then when you break down how many of our people actually live in the middle class or have median wealth by American standards, it's only like a small percent, maybe 4% or something like that. So that will be my only pushback. But I understand when people are looking at the metric of are you employed, or what are you making on your job, and do you have a car? And I can understand. I can understand that. But we won't. I just have to put that out there. When we talk about middle class, we're talking about American wealth standards, because there's some people that don't even they can live a quote unquote middle class lifestyle just off of their assets. They don't even have to work. You know.
That's right.
So yeah.
That's right. That's right. You
Yeah,
got
yeah. Beck coins this era in like this black uprising, the great leveling, right? And he comes up with these data points, but at that time it doesn't exclude wealth, and there's no way to go back there and look at wealth, but we understand our wealth position because of where we came from. So while you can infer from more blacks having jobs, and getting these industrial jobs and warehouses and things of that nature, and you move to the north, and the north paid way better than the south when you was able to get these warehouse jobs like in the butchering sections of town. You was able to do better, but I don't think it rose to the point that we were actually stable. These were still unstable, and there was a gang of people fleeing from the south to the north that put a lot of pressure on those of us that was doing well. Just like today, it hasn't changed. So while you can infer that blacks did better, right? You always do better when you have a job, especially a good job versus no job. I don't think you can necessarily, especially in America, put yourself in the middle class,
And I think
indeed.
the whole point is just to show that when we are have been put in a position where they had to, because of we were the ones that were there, we the one that had the skills, and we were the one that had the manpower, and you didn't oversaturate the job market with everybody else and people are already looking for a reason not to hire freedmen to keep us in a subjugated position. When you don't oversaturate the job market with foreign workers, then you're going to see freedmen having jobs, and you're going to see a improvement in the quality of life of the freedmen.
That's right. So let me continue. Ibrahim brought up the great leveling and the great leveling, and I was like right at that point in the book on page 12. So let's read. That immensely positive period between 1940 and the 1970s has been labeled quote unquote the great leveling because of the shrinking of racial and economic inequality during that time of lower immigration and tight labor conditions. I love how he stresses that point, and to bring that out, that because there was lowered immigration or restrictions or immigration, we were able to take our skills that we had from being the America's workers and put them to use. And being so eager to earn work, we would go to the north and learn in a heartbeat. Like every job I've ever worked, I picked up stuff just so fast. Maybe it's just the freedman in me. I don't know, but I always picked it up fast, and that's something that we can attribute to a lot of our people as well, because I've seen it. I've had to train people, etc., and I've seen the difference at times. So let me finish reading. Right, it says, surprisingly, most of the closing of the wage gap and most of the advancement of Black Americans into the middle class occurred before 1964 and 1965, when the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts were passed. Sadly, as Congress in the 1960s was tearing down barriers to social and political equality, it inadvertently erected a new barrier against economic equality for African Americans. It reopened the hiring lines of America to mass immigration. Page 13, the renewal of mass immigration after 1965, paying no attention to what its actions might do to Black economic progress. I don't believe that right there. I believe they knew full well white supremacy is an interwoven system in this country that operates 24/7 around the clock, and it has been operating all the way back since the anti-federalist movement, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, let's continue. The Congress in 1965 passed a sweeping immigration act that restarted mass immigration. Much more attention was paid to African Americans in 1990, when Congress again greatly increased annual immigration. But the attention and intention was all negative. The congressional majority was protecting employers from having to work harder at recruiting from the Black underclass. It was reacting to a Department of Labor report that the growth in the white male working age population was slowing down, necessitating a need for businesses to better recruit and train from the underused resource of less educated Black labor. Business lobbies rejected that possibility and demanded more foreign labor. Congress met their demands and relieved employers from increasing their Black employment. By the 1990s, the annual arrivals of foreign workers had quadrupled from before 1965. It is a surge averaging more than 1 million a year that has continued unabated for 3 decades. 1 million a year, family. This was congressional action at the beck and call, no pun intended, of the corporations in the United States of America that I surmise got so used to not hiring freedmen. And because there's nepotism in most corporate entities, that mindset, and this is my assessment, got passed on from generation to generation. My daddy didn't hire these Negroes. I'm not going to hire them. All the way up until the 1990s, family. Something to think about.
I mean, America knew quite well what it was doing. For centuries, it had, experimented with these immigration patterns to kind of see the ebbs and the flows and how it would affect the Black community. And you got to think, at this period you're reading at now, this is a century after Karl Marx, right? And Karl Marx writes about, how capitalists need this new influx of immigration, to create this wage drive to the bottom. So they had all of the science, the experiments, and the know-how after experimenting with this for a while. So they knew exactly what they were doing. This was all about capitalists. This was all about their bottom line and becoming wealthier. And, we just didn't get included in the equation. It was, benign and neglect.
That's right. That's right. Let me move this. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit more. I'm gonna read tonight. Y'all just jump in. It continues on page 13. In the decades before 1965, despite Jim Crow racism and the absence of federal civil rights laws and affirmative action, Black Americans were able to achieve phenomenal economic progress during the tight labor conditions that were assisted by low immigration. I think when I read this, I thought about the Cosby Show, right? And I thought about, my grandmother's side of the family and my mother's side of the family. On my grandmother's side of the family, we called them the Cosbys, right? Another one of my lines that came from South Carolina, and they were always more middle class than my mother's side of the family. So I was able to have like 2 kinds of experiences, but I stayed with my mother. I grew up in Nyhiem, New York City housing projects, right? So I grew up with that Freedmen experience that the other America, or those of us, I should say, who live in the other America experience in ways that some find comparable to third world countries, right? So, that part, for whatever reason, made me think about the Cosby Show and my father's side of the family. So it continues. The economic progress was both a result of the dramatic reduction in manual immigration numbers and also a major contributor to the end of government-endorsed racial discrimination. the economic and societal changes that followed the curtailment of immigration made possible the success of the civil rights revolution of the 1950s and 60s, according to Stanford economic historian Gavin Wright. Without the immigration reduction, I want y'all to hear this, family. This is vital. Without the without the immigration reduction, the great migration of Black Southerners to the North and West would not have occurred as it did. And the civil rights movement would never have progressed as it did. The Great Migration and the resulting rapid rise in Black incomes spurred the increased enrollment at historic Black colleges and the elevated numbers of Black lawyers, physicians, clergy, and other professionals whose ranks produced the leaders of the civil rights movement. Without the Great Migration and the Great Leveling, it is difficult to imagine the civil rights movement's successes in the 1950s and 1960s. So, you know, when you read that particular excerpt, or if you listen to it, you're forced to think about this, who we call the second Freedman King, Martin Luther King Jr., right? How does immigration, if allowed without this, what's called leveling period, have affected Martin Luther King Jr.'s, you know, his experience in a historically Black college, right? We get to thinking about a lot of our great ancestors who went on to become great leaders that came out of HBCUs. You can't help but to think about it. They, you know, you hear people say, oh, the immigrants are not taking your jobs. The immigrants are not taking your job. Well, they are. Let me stop and share something real quick. And they're taking the jobs because the United States of America, they get to pick who's going to win and who's going to lose in this country. Let me share this. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Lawmakers introduced a bill to help refugees attend Georgia colleges. Legislation would help refugees qualify for more affordable in-state tuition rates as soon as they settle in the state. So I want to keyword through something real quick. And it's a word that Beck touches on in his book a lot, right? And this word right here, labor shortages. So it says, pay attention, family. In Georgia and across the country, the pace of the post-COVID economic recovery has been slowed by the persistent challenge of labor shortages. Quote, we currently have more jobs in Georgia available than we have people to fill them. A lot of small business owners are telling me, quote, we need access to more labor, Cantrell said. All refugees want to do is work. They want to live the American dream. Easing their access to education could help make that happen. Let me tell y'all something, family. Like I said earlier, I grew up in the housing projects of New York City. I was kind of wild in the hood. But when the construction coalitions were formed, Black men would get up in their respective neighborhoods and they would jump in vans. Matter of fact, let me pull that back up while I'm talking. They would jump in vans and we would meet up in Brooklyn from all 5 boroughs. All 5 boroughs. And we would have to go to these construction sites and force ourselves onto the jobs because they were not hiring the freedmen. Guys that hustled every single day. And when I say hustle, I mean sold drugs. Every day, they packed these vans looking for construction work because they would rather have been doing something legal than illegal. And Beck also touches on that in this book, cites reports and quotations. This kills the silly points of bootstrapperism brought up by the Larry Elders and the McWaters, you can name them, the Thomas Sowells, and all of these people that pretty much say that blacks should just be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make it in this country as I've been able to make it. And a lot of these so-called black talking conservative voices are immigrants themselves. They're immigrants themselves. They were raised in immigrant households. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that later. So, yeah, go ahead, brother.
He uses the term, labor shortage to just draw attention to that nuance, right? Is it really a labor shortage? And, we know in our community, our unemployment rate is always around 8% or higher, right? Is dang near always double the white unemployment rate. And there was an article that came out and it pointed to one city like Chicago where it says, hey, 40% of black men was out of work in the year 2015. So you're not talking about a labor shortage, because even if you don't count, the actual unemployment rate and you just go by the academic unemployment rate, those are men that are people that's in the last month, right, that's applied for jobs and did not get those jobs, right? So you can't have a labor shortage if you got a bunch of people applying for jobs and not being able to get those jobs. What you have is jobs that's specifically seeking certain type of individuals to work those jobs, because the pay 9 times out of 10 is not, adequate enough to live an American lifestyle. And I know you'll get to this later. There's one example in the book where a bunch of Hispanics had undercut Black American workers, right? And come to find out, after they secured those jobs, they doubled back and filed a lawsuit because they said, hey, when we was living like 10 families in one house, we could work these jobs for minimum wages.
That's right.
But now that we want to live in an American household, the job wages is not sufficient. So, I thought that part was interesting, but that's later in the book.
That's right. So I want to, they have Athens Technical College there in this article, right? They have a picture. I was living in Athens for, 13 years. If the government, and this is for everybody that's listening, right? We got our normal audience and we have some people that may be listening in. If the government is willing to put resources into immigrants coming over and getting a free education at a place like Athens Tech, why can't those same resources go into pulling people out of these poor neighborhoods like the east side of Athens and putting those young men and women to work? The United States of America needs a bottom, because that's how capitalist works. That's how capitalism works. It needs a bottom. And when you have prison labor and you drive this narrative that black folk, particularly meaning us freedmen, are born prisoners, are born criminals, that our thought processes are just criminal in nature, that we're beasts, savages, the things that were said during the 1800s, the things that were said to justify slavery in the first place, what was said to justify the murder of Michael Brown. You get to bypass those people. I mean, the guy in the article, let's real quick before I continue, let me go back and find that piece, right? And I did a quote that said, I did a tweet that said, labor shortage is another term for replace freedmen with immigrants. Let me read this again. In Georgia and across the country, the pace of the post-COVID economic recovery has been slowed by the persistent challenge of labor shortages. Quote, we currently have more jobs in Georgia available than we have people to fill them. A lot of business owners are telling me we need access to more labor. All refugees want to do is work. They want to live the American dream. Easing their access to education could help make that happen. I know all freedmen that want to work. I know young brothers right now that want to work. And because they can't get the quality jobs like everybody else, or can't get a good job at all because maybe they have a bad background, they're forced to remain in the street life. This isn't a right issue. This is a right and left issue. This ain't just the right wing or the left wing. This is the whole bird that flies overhead and pounces upon us as an eagle does a rabbit. I mean, it takes our meat and carcasses back to its young, and its young are new Americans, i.e. or e.g., Office of New Americas, and basically feeds us to them. And we just are here to churn the prison industrial system. Why would you bypass Atlanta? These young brothers are joining gangs for a reason. These spikes in crimes in black neighborhoods all over the country are for a reason. And our politicians on the right and the left has shown us that they do not care about us. We got to be clear. It ain't just the left. I'm gonna get to the reading part, but it's more back to the book. But it ain't just the left, family. It's the right as well, because Black Americans, freedmen, have the most hate crimes against in the United States every single year. A few people get harassed during COVID-19, a few Asians, and they get a whole bill passed for them. I bring this up all the time about Macy Hirono and Tammy Duckworth, the senators out of Hawaii and Illinois, that said if Biden's administration didn't support and pass the bill that they were proposing for the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, they could forget about any nominees being voted on their behalf. They would abstain. You know, of course, they eventually went back and they passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. In the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, they had the names of the murdered Asian Americans that were murdered in a shop in Atlanta by a white man, right? That it wasn't over COVID. It was over his own demented lusts and sexual perversions. They put his name in the bill, family. When Dylan Roof went into a church in South Carolina, prayed with them first, and then murdered them, left one alive so he could run back and tell everybody that he was trying to spark a race war. We didn't get no bills that came from us. I say all of that to say that when the COVID-19 Hate Crime Act bill of 2021 passed, and the bills for the Asian American Pacific Islanders, the Republicans, they voted with the Democrats. There was only one negative vote, and that was Josh Hawley. He was the only one that didn't vote against it. So you agree to collude to keep freedmen down in this country. Right and the left agree that they will uphold the system of white supremacy in suppressing the freedmen. Point blank, period. There's no other way to look at it. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Ibrahim.
When you think about jobs in Georgia, right? Atlanta has the highest income inequality in America. And only about around 35% of Americans have bachelor degrees. So we're not talking about, jobs that you need a lot of education for. You go to Athens Technical College because you're going to learn a trade or a skill or get certified to get a really good job, right? That will lead to a career, doing general labor or blue collar work. These are the type of jobs that, basically anybody can be trained for and do pretty easily. And to not go to the communities that's already there and been historically there, right? And to like bring in this new flux of immigrants to do the labor, and provide services and goods and, work amongst the people that's already been there while, freedmen are there being locked out, man, like that's as racist as, racists can get. You're basically saying, this group is designated to be in the black market, to be in the mortuary, to be in the prisons, the jails, the strip club. We have something else for this group. Jobs isn't good enough. We got to keep them on the bottom, like you said. And that type of policy goes on both sides of the aisle. You didn't see a big uproar from any Georgia politicians. Georgia flipped blue this year. There's no big uproar about getting freedmen jobs, about getting black people jobs. Georgia flips blue, Atlanta flip white, right? And like those issues aren't talked about on the political scene. What you do here is we need to get HR1 and HR5 passed. We got to get this voting rights passed. What's the use of getting the voting rights passed if there's nothing tangible to vote for that can benefit you and your community and help you live an American life?
That's right. That's right. Brother Josh, you had anything you wanted to share?
Just had to put my kid to bed, so that's why I've been kind of off to the side. I'm just now getting set up, situated with my laptop. So, but yes, and I have my points that I want to bring up in the book, and I won't be too long. And if you in just a few minutes here, but in that regard, what you guys were just talking about, yeah, it's we see that wherever you have increased immigration, you're going to have increased inequality. And when we see that they're continuing this, and they always use the code word, that's one key point that we need to reiterate. Anytime you hear labor shortage, moving forward, not just today, keep this in the back of your mind. The language of a labor shortage is code word for we need to keep wages down. We need to keep freedmen boxed out of employment, and we, as the top capitalists of America, need to keep profits up. If you notice that profits have not declined. I mean, it's another thing is like when you want to go, if you go look at like the inequality chart, and we should probably bring this up, but the wealth inequality chart and the immigration chart, I bet you they'll be correlating. And what I mean by that is there's the way that corporate America, and let's say average CEO pay, and stock shareholder payout, I mean, and the appreciation of these large corporate shares, that's going to have a direct correlation to immigration, because basically the money that is not paid out in salaries and benefits and things like that, employee compensation, where does it go? Does it just get donated back out to do they just like say, oh, we just going to give it back to the economy in terms of taxes to the local government, or we just going to do charity and we're going to give that money to poor folks? No, that goes into the pockets and into the bank accounts of the wealthy class who benefits off of the labor. So that's one of the key points, and that is the increase in it's just basic economics. If you don't understand economics, anytime you increase the supply of something, you decrease the value of it, and you because it's in abundance. So that's why sand is free. Nobody's charging you for sand. You just go to the beach and you just go pick it up, and you could take it home with you. Nobody's going to arrest you. But you go to the jewelry store, and which a lot of these jewels are found in the dirt. But it's so hard to find one of those jewels in the dirt. You can dig forever, and you would never find one, right? But it's so hard to find. So that grain of sand that's in abundance, you can have for free. But that ruby or diamond or whatever that's in the dirt also, that costs a lot of money. That's worth a lot of money because it's so few. So anytime you increase the price of something, you increase the supply of something, you're going to decrease the price, and that's they increase the supply of labor, you're going to decrease the price of labor. And if the freedmen are already at the back and at the bottom and already getting paid the least and getting hired the least, then you better believe that we're going to have the most be the most affected by this. And it's not by accident, it's by design. And some people can make the argument that, well, they're not targeting us per se. Yeah, but we have this book didn't say the 20-year history. It said the 200-year history.
That's right.
So we already know we have a long track record. And as we have a long track record of demonstrating how it's harmful to us. And as we've already covered, we have a long track record of our leaders and people who had their finger on the pulse of the freedmen expressing their troubles with the American immigration policy. But you can go ahead, keep going, brother. I'm gonna get my stuff set up, and I'm gonna share my screen from the actual book.
So you basically saying as they increase the labor market, even though we at the back of the hiring line, as they increase the pool of labor, it decreases our wages or our
Yeah,
ability to demand higher wages.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I was trying to find while you were talking, Josh, I was trying to find Biden's remarks when he was asked about reparations during the primary. Oh, there we
Oh
go.
yeah, it'll be great if you can cue that video up.
Yo, man, I got two of them. We're gonna get back to the book, family. We gonna get this discussion finished. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, but it's important to tie this stuff into today and in
That's
real
right.
life, not
That's
where
right.
it's at, how it's applied, and
That's
so you
right.
can see it in real time. Because a lot of times, man, when you hear people say stuff and you're like, "Oh, he's saying immigrants," yeah, but you don't understand how diabolical it is to say that. And you've been before he was a president, he was a vice president, and he was a senator, wasn't he? Senator
That's right.
from I think he was in Delaware. So how can you say that? You know, because let's keep something else in mind. Joe Biden was a part of this harmful immigration policy when they did the immigration spikes that Beck was talking about. When they got the Department of Labor reports that we're going, you probably, I don't know if you all got to that yet. The Department of
No.
Labor reports in the 90s and I think it was 1987 that that was talking about how basically we got this shortage of white labor that
Oh yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
have an
I did
opening
get
in the
that.
marketplace, and we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna need. It's time to go ahead and start hiring from the underhired and the previously forgotten and freedmen population. Who else who was a part of that congressional body? It was also Joe Biden. So this is not a guy
That's
who
right.
just
That's
right
right.
now just running for president. Oh, he just riding the immigrant wave. No, he helped create the policy. He knew full well what was going on. So he was a part of that. And you can't say he didn't know nothing. Barbara Jordan in the 1990s, uh, up until her death, was advocating on these issues. So he knew full well. And as a person that went and did the crime bill and that devastated black folks and it was a part of the immigration policy that devastated black folks, man. And now you want to talk you don't have nothing to say about reparations except for immigrants of the future? Go ahead, cue that up, brother Nyhiem.
All right. First, let's do this first. We love properly framing things over here at Be the Power. aka Freedmen University. That's what I believe we're gonna name the other channel that. The new website is coming soon. It was supposed to be done today. It just didn't get done today. It didn't get done today. But it will be out soon. So make sure y'all look forward to that. On the 22nd, family, mark y'all's calendars. We will be interviewing the author, Roy Beck, author of this particular book. Tomorrow night, we're going to have another discussion as well, though. It's so much to cover that it's impossible for us to get into one session. But I want to bring this up. This is from the Economic Policy Institute, cited in Bloomberg Opinion. Flying up the ladder. Look at what it says. Hispanic incomes grew faster than those of any other group in recent years. Estimated percent growth in median household income between 2014 and 2019. I want y'all to take a good look at that, right? Let me see. Before I get to that, before I get to what Biden is saying. So let's look at these years. Between 5 years. See, if you look at white, right? I mean, they're already the uber wealthy in this country. They have old money. Their ancestry, the Anglo-Saxons of them, right, or what some could call foundational white Americans, goes back to the beginning of this country. Those immigrants that we spoke about that came from Northern Europe, especially, they've been here for a long time. Donald Trump is the result of that. When you think about what happened in New York, and I'm going to get to that, I might get to some of that, right? What happened in New York with the draft riots up there, et cetera, but and the Ku Klux Klan, and the rumors that Trump's father was a Klansman, et cetera. This is what was going on during that time, and a lot of these people come from that. They definitely come from that. So we could say white median household income didn't have to rise because they're already in such a position that they're at the top of the economic food chain, if you will. But look at blacks, right? It didn't rise that much. Didn't rise that much in between the years of 2015 and 2019. Pull up articles how Barack Obama destroyed black wealth. Barack Obama was a horrible, horrible president for the freedmen. And for those of you who are watching this, watching Be the Power for the first time, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon. Pull up articles, Google them, keyword them right now. Barack Obama destroyed black wealth. And article after article after article is going to come up. So around 2014 and 2015, when the labor markets start their recovery and employment surges begin to happen, well, look at where black folks are insofar as how our incomes grew. They didn't grow that much at all between the years of 2014 and 2019. We should at the least be ahead of everybody. But look at Hispanics right next to them. How is it that their incomes have grown exponentially? Not just exponentially for themselves, but exponentially past us, the freedmen here in the United States of America. And look who's running neck and neck with them. What some call in America the model minority. Well, part of the model minority, that they all group under this category called Asian. That's another thing that Beck speaks about in his book. And these new policies are being drafted. All of a sudden, all of these different ethnic groups have a new name, Hispanic. Well, all of the different ethnic groups from China and Japan, Korea, the Philippines, India, some of these people don't look alike. They don't look alike. I'm sorry. The people from India don't look like the Chinese or the Filipinos, etc. How is it that they just become Asian under this one group? And these people are, if my memory serves me correctly, worth $43,000 more than us at the median. It's either the median or the mean. I can't remember at the moment. I have those charts as well. But let me get out of this. I want to go before we get to the clips of Biden. I want to pull up one more thing. You know, like I told y'all, framing is important. 2014 and 2019, we see exponential growth of Hispanics and Asians. But what was happening to us during the years of, let's go all the way back to the year 2000 until now? Oh, this is an article that came out September 23rd, 2020, that we cite all the time here on Be the Power. This story was covered by NPR and several other news agencies. Cost of racism. U.S. economy lost $16 trillion because of discrimination, bank says. So it says, since 2000, U.S. gross domestic product lost that much as a result of discriminatory practices in a range of areas, including in education and access to business loans, including in education, where now they want to bring in immigrants as opposed to just getting the freedmen who are dying literally to get better educations and better jobs so that they could become better men and better Americans in this society. This is crazy. It says, according to a new study by Citigroup, it's not an insignificant number. By comparison, U.S. GDP totaled $19.5 trillion last year. So they're telling us that how much we've been discriminated against in a 20-year period is almost the GDP of the whole country for a year, right? And let's be clear on who they're talking about. So let me go to the opening paragraph. It says, nationwide protests have cast a spotlight on racism and inequality in the United States. Now a major bank has put a price tag on how much the economy has lost as a result of discrimination against African Americans. 16 trillion. So while America is catering to Hispanics and Asians, well, let's go here. Let us go here. Let's see what Biden said. We built this country for free. We built this country for free. Let's see what Biden says. Hold on. Ibrahim, let me know if you can hear this. I don't know if I clicked the audio.
40, which is the bill that has been proposed in Congress to establish reparations. But we shouldn't wait for that commission to do its work to do things that are reparative. Remember, we're not talking about a gift to anybody. We're talking about mending what was broken. We're talking about the generational theft of the wealth of generations of African Americans. And just crossing out a racist policy and replacing it with a neutral one is not enough to deliver equality. Harms compound, just like a dollar saved in its value compounds over time. So does the value of a dollar stolen. And that is why the United States must act immediately with investments in minority-owned businesses.
Oh, no, Booty Eggs, you just messed up.
He messed up, but
on the longer term.
Let me pause it real quick, John. The problem is nobody's on the right saying these things, Josh. That's the problem, right? The right looks at this issue and say, oh, that's a left issue, so we're going to reject it, knowing that that's not why they're rejecting it. They know that that's not why they're rejecting it. But because anybody from the left might push it, they're going to make it a left issue so that they can reject it while they watch us sink deeper and deeper into decadence. It's just ridiculous.
So that we can mend what has been broken.
Vice President Biden,
okay, let's hear Biden's response to the same question on reparations.
Since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every.
Hey, stop it right there, bro. The reason why we're the country we are is because of immigration. Well, you know, I guess he's probably right. You know, depending on how you look at it, maybe he's right.
Maybe he's right.
You think so who are we as a country? We're a country where the middle, when you take out depreciating assets, your car and all that kind of stuff, your furniture, all that kind of stuff that is not that loses value every year. We really ain't got nothing. Like Freedmen, the middle Freedman family is probably worth like $2,000 or something like that, 1,700. I think that was the figure that came out several years ago. I don't know how much, if it hasn't climbed too much more higher. If anything, probably got lower. In DC, I know the middle Freedman family, Native Black family, is worth $3,500. That's the net worth, right? So if we know if America is a country of immigration, then that maybe can speak to why the freedmen have the disproportionate way. Like, okay, just to give you a juxtaposition, white American wealth is like 384,000. The middle family in DC, the middle Indian American family 573,000. So if we maybe we are a country of the centered around immigration, and maybe that's the problem and the reason why we see such huge levels of disparity following massive waves, especially following massive waves of mass immigration.
That's
go ahead. Keep
what
pushing.
A powerful way to kind of reframe that, Josh, because our snapback is usually always the same. No, America is not a country of immigrants. Our ancestors built the economic foundation of this country. Hell, this country wouldn't be without the free slave labor of our ancestors. But maybe Biden is speaking in or with the contemporaneous framing. I don't know. I mean, that's I like the way you put that. But let's hear what Biden says so far when asked about reparations for African Americans, the descendants of slaves. Joe Biden has already, I don't know what they call him, Sleepy Joe, Demented Joe, or whatever. He's already talking about immigrants. He started off by saying, being that I haven't had a chance to speak on this topic yet, and then he went to talking about the United States has cherry-picked the best immigrants from around the world. When you go back and you think about Beck's book and how they were importing Northern Europeans over here, and you think about Trump talking about the Scandinavians or somebody.
Mm-hmm.
This is
countries
crazy.
like Norway, I think he said.
Norway, yeah, you're right. Norway. It was another country that I can't think of at the moment as well. But let's finish hearing what our president has said about reparations for African Americans. Let's continue.
People who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it. Every single American.
Whoa. That's Biden, family. We got another one. Before we get into it, Josh, I want to play one more. Before we get into it, I want to.
How do you ask? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, brother. How do you
get that from a question about reparations for the freedmen? He didn't mention the freedmen one time. He deflected completely to another group.
A whole nother group, Josh. A whole nother group.
This is something that I want to say too. This is, I guess, as good a time as any to make this point. One of the things that I appreciated in Beck's book was, and this is something that we need to make sure we focus on and keep in the back of our mind, is he didn't the focus is not really to demonize or attack any particular group, even though we may have conflicts or we may have beef with certain individuals or maybe certain people who align with certain groups, and we know that there's the pathway to elevation requires, or I should say, you get fast tracked if you're willing to step on the freedom, right? But it's not really about the groups or the people, right? That is the focus of our of what we want addressed and fixed, and that's not really where we is productive to direct our angst. It's productive to direct it towards revising the policy.
Here's
Because
my policy.
there's no way it's no way for us to, there's no way for, like, you're fighting like, it's almost like you're just trying to stomp on roaches, right? But you're not trying to call the remediation company to get them to start spraying and laying traps and stuff. You just said, man, I can't stand these roaches. I'm gonna stomp everyone I see. Yeah, but you're gonna be stomping for the rest of your life. Eventually, you're gonna be overrun. You better call Orkin. You better call the Orkin man, and that's what we need to do. Is in terms of, I ain't mean to make it like we exterminated, but you know, essentially, you have to get to the root of the problem, and that's kind of what the policy does, because the root, it started with policy. It started with policy, so it has to be fixed with policy. The same way that our slavery, even going back to the colonial times with the Negro laws of Virginia, that was started with policy. You know, it wasn't a democratic process, but it was a dictatorship process, or you know, some type of feudal process, but it was policy. And so to fix this, it has to be policy. And a lot of times, you know, we get in conversations with people in these groups, and a lot of times people that we talking to don't even live in America. They're somewhere in their country. They mad about their country being messed up too, and they need somebody else to take out that anguish on. So they take it out on us because we mad, because we at the bottom and messed up. And you don't even know, you're talking to somebody you're not even talking to a Nigerian in America. You're talking to a Nigerian in Nigeria.
And they're all over social media, Clubhouse, Twitter, everywhere, demonizing us. Ain't that something?
Yeah, so it's the policy that needs to be the focus, and not the people. But with that being said, I'll be damned somebody finna disrespect.
That's a fact.
Us and we didn't put the work that we put in.
That's a fact.
And this right here is extremely disrespectful when he says they're willing to work like the devil and they're resilient. Well, how are we still here if we're not resilient? Like, how are we still even in existence if we're not resilient?
That's right. I mean, geez, Ibrahim gave the best analogy when he said, when it comes to talking about freedmen, black folk, Biden just, Sleepy Joe just comes alive and start playing whack-a-mole. It's like just Negroes popping their head up. What are you doing? Right? It's like Charlemagne. If I'll tell you one thing, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Whack-a-mole. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Sheesh. Hey, Biden, what do you think about reparations for African Americans? There are 24 out of 100 kids in every classroom who are Hispanic. It'll be stupid of us to not put all of our focus and energy on them. It's like, we not whack-a-mole. This dude, I mean, it is ridiculous how Biden gets animated when it comes to our people. Hey, Biden, we want you to talk to a group of so-called black leaders, Congressional Black Caucus members and activists. Sure, I'll come on. Biden gets right on there and starts talking to them like they little kids, like they're servants of his. You know, like, y'all working in my kitchen and y'all keep burning the food. What the hell is going on? Yo, this is crazy. Let's play this clip, though. Let's hear what Biden has to say. Biden, the future depends on the success of Hispanics.
Success of this country. Today, it is no exaggeration to say that the future of the success of this country depends on Hispanics having opportunities and the tools they need to succeed. Look, Donald Trump has failed the Hispanic community time and time again, and that's not a secret. Whether it's in his heinous act of separating children from their families at our border, or his repeated attacks on Dreamers, or his neglect of the people of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, or his repeated failure to make sure essential workers have the personal protective equipment they need. Donald Trump has done nothing but assault the dignity of Hispanic families over and over and over and over again.
Okay, we could stop that. Our families have been separated since the times of slavery. Report after report has come out about how the Family and Children's Services in the United States of America, state by state, disproportionately target black families. Pull up at any article on children, the Department of Family and Children's Services across the United States of America. And you're going to see that white and Hispanic children especially are almost always given the benefit of the doubt. The black child almost always gets taken and put into a foster home, ruining his young life and his, man. Whew. Let's get back to the book. Josh, you ready to get back to the book, bro?
Yeah. So I got a little piece here. You know, Roy Beck's talking about the pandemic. So since Joe Biden was talking about essential workers, says let Americans do the work. During the partial shutdown of the U.S. economy in reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic, the media were filled with stories about a newly discovered species of humans called essential workers. Yep. Previously overlooked or underappreciated by many, they received applause, yard signs, internet salutes, celebrity treatment from entertainment and sports celebrities, and all kinds of praise from elected officials. While everybody was managing to work or otherwise survive in isolation, essential workers were doing the jobs that only could be done while exposed to other people. What made them essential was that all the protected and isolated Americans had to depend on them if they were going to eat, if they're going to have water and heat, or to get rid of their trash and sewage, to receive mail and other front door deliveries, to deal with urgent maintenance issues, and to have security of knowing that health, police, and fire personnel will be available if needed. Many of those workers in healthcare and other fields of professionals who had college degrees, but most essential workers did not. Large numbers of them earn wages barely in the middle class or below it. It took a deadly coronavirus to cause many Americans to pause and notice how important the rest of the workforce was to the nation's daily quality of life. These weren't just people who may not have thrived as well in academic grading systems of high school. They were people with aptitudes, temperament, skills, and humanity that, when applied to their jobs, were, yes, essential to the function of American society. And then it goes on talking about, it says, just before pandemic shutdown in early 2020, economist Elise Gould advised it's important to keep in mind when analyzing the labor market and discussing economic policy that 61.9% of the workforce do not have a 4-year college degree. If the economy is going to deliver decent wages for most of U.S. workers, it needs to deliver for the 6 in 10 workers who did not have a 4-year college degree. Within a few months, a significant portion of those were the ones being lauded with the honorific of the year, essential workers. Politicians and media commentators often reminded the public that essential workers were disproportionately African American and other ethnic minorities. A window on the nation's treatment of essential workers offers an important view of the treatment of non-college degree African Americans. Most of the people celebrated as essential workers during the pandemic were part of the working classes whose interests have been ignored and devalued for decades by the makers of immigration policies that have steadily depressed their wages and their labor participation rates. And of course, many of them were immigrants themselves who now find their climb up on the economic ladder depressed by each annual legal arrival of 1 million more permanent competitors, not counting the unauthorized foreign workers. So I'm going to just stop there. You know, he continues. So I'm going to stop there, and I just wanted to bring up the point of, you know, a lot of us, a huge amount of freedmen, and it's really like shameful on the part of America that we have a large portion of our society that does not have a high school diploma and does not have a college degree. When, you know, we are the people who built the country. We've been here the longest, and we fought and had HBCUs, institutions established for us, right? And so why are we disproportionately essential workers? Number one. Number two, the point that needs to be highlighted is a point that y'all probably heard me say a bunch of times and that is most immigrants don't want more immigration. Like, most immigrants, when they think of immigration, they're thinking of competition, other people coming from the countries they're coming from, that they know what they're doing. They know what they're trying to do. They know how they're going to be competing. and it's driving wages down. Not only coming as essential workers, like we're talking about people who are working picking cotton, or I don't know, people ain't picking cotton anymore, but working and picking blueberries and avocados and all this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? But if those people working, these immigrants have displaced the freedmen, but they know that somebody else from their country that's more desperate is coming to replace them. So their opportunity is getting drove down. Their job prospects are getting drove down. Their wages are getting drove down. Their working conditions are getting driven down. I just want to say real quick, and even in the upper, the higher levels of employment, we talk about maybe more skill or education that's required, like your healthcare workers, whether you're a nurse or doctor. Right now, he brought up another point in the book that there's more Filipino doctors than there are Black doctors in America.
Hey, let me jump in. A friend of mine, and Josh, you was on the phone, was speaking to that, right? About how this particular company is bringing in Filipino nurses. Like, they're basically bypassing our people, and not just our people, just everyday Americans, to bring these people over here under the guise that there's some sort of labor shortage. Right? We have to, at some point in this particular stream, we need to throw out some theories, some political solutions and theory on how we can fix this thing, because remember, I see you in the audience, Ibrahim. He dropped off. I want to play something real quick, Josh.
Yeah, and then I would like to. Somebody asked an interesting question.
Yeah. We gonna get to your question, bro. Let's play this clip.
Right. Radical conversation. No, this is literally right now 90% white people. But if you take the population of all those states, put them together, they're only 1/4 the population of Black people in this country. It's not about your scale. People say, well, Black people can't think they're going to have that much power. They're only 14% of the population. Scale has nothing to do with it.
That's right.
Those people in those 6 or 7 states represent only 3% of the American population, but they also represent 1 out of every 6 Senate votes ever cast on any issue.
Wow.
What you have to do is decide if you want to be strategically arrayed in America rather than completely spread out. And there's a Balkanization of this country that's coming, whether I wrote this book or not. It's happening. In 30 years from now, 6, 7, 8 of the southwestern states will be majority Hispanic, not majority brown, not majority minority, majority Hispanic. They will send whatever delegation they want to Washington, and they should. They will control all those electoral college votes, and then that's the way it breaks. Hawaii will continue to be majority Asian, South Pacific Islander, and they will send people representing that demographic to Congress as they do now. Oregon, Washington, down into the Rockies will continue to be majority white. Everything east of that will be some combination of majority white and majority minority. There is not a single state on that map 30 years from now that is projected to be majority Black. Now, Black people just have a choice to make. As I've been going in this book, I keep saying, I'm not twisting you on. I'm saying, do you want state power or not?
That's right.
Because you can have it. It has nothing to do with your scale. Has nothing to do with you being 14% of the population. It has to do with where do you want to literally position yourself in the country, because you can have that power.
Yeah, so I wanted to play that because, like I said, all of the book club books that we've studied and placed emphasis on all are interlocking pieces as we push forward and trying to figure out the best way to stop us from, basically dying out in this country. And I was trying to find a highlighted section of Beck's book where the freedmen in the state of New York, the freedmen in the state of New York were basically outnumbered. I got it highlighted. I think I'm just browsing too fast, so I can't find it at the moment. But Brother Ibrahim, did you want to speak to any of that? Yeah, brother. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Josh.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up. Let's say engaging black. So what do you say to some people that view white supremacy as more of a threat than immigration? Yeah. So what I would say to that is, immigration is a threat. Like some people have looked at immigration, and maybe a false narrative was painted to us about immigration that made us think that, well, let more brown people come over here and then it won't be a white majority, and then that will create a better life for us, not understanding that there is no brown. When they say black and brown, that Ann Brown's only there to come and eat dinner. Ann Brown is not there to help you cook or wash the dishes. Ann Brown just show up to come and eat the dinner that you went to the store.
That's right.
You bought the groceries. You did all the cooking. You know all the prep work, all the cooking, and then Ann Brown come up, show up, eat dinner. Thank you, ha, drink up your wine and all this kind of stuff. All right. Oh, well, can you help me wash dishes? You got something on the meal? Can you help me do this? No, I've got to go. I gotta go. Thank you for filling my belly. That's what Ann Brown do. So people only willing to come and participate in the fight when they get their benefit using up our story, our energy, and then they use it for their purposes. So I say all that to say, a lot of us been lied to, making us think that immigration is helpful because there's some black and brown coalition that's gonna happen, and you're going to defeat white supremacy by allying with some other groups because at the end of the day, there is no brown people. People can be, people going to be white. Look at the racial classification system. The racial classification system doesn't say brown. It says black or African American, Asian American, Pacific Islander, white or Caucasian, American Indian, Alaska Native. Mm-hmm. And what's the other ones? Hispanic, which can include white. That's why they say non-white Hispanic and Hispanic. So a lot of times people coming in, they check in the white box when they classifying, they associate, and they doing everything to access whiteness. So in many ways, immigration is an extension, or it can be made a security blanket to a certain class of white supremacy. If you think about it, we talked about how it's made to debase labor. Well, if you're at the top class or the top wealthy class of white supremacy, immigration is you love immigration. It's helpful to you. You get to increase your profits of your corporations. You get to keep the labor market loose. So it solidifies white supremacy. Now, what it does, the people that are in the lower rungs of white supremacy, they only really get to participate in white supremacy in name only. They don't get to participate in like any real tangible terms. Just so I don't know. That's just how I view that question. And more of a threat? Is white supremacy more of a threat than immigration? Immigration is a threat to you. We've been dealing with white supremacy for a long time, and even when we were dealing with white supremacy severe in the times. My bad, Nyhiem, you can jump in. But even during the times of we're talking about Reconstruction, and we're talking about in the 1920s when immigration was lessened, we, a lot of Black America was able to make take greater leaps than when it wasn't there.
That's
so, right. I mean, immigration, I look at it like mass immigration and loose immigration policy that just lets everybody come over here. I look at it as like a hole in your pocket, right? It's a hole in your pocket, no matter what else is done. If you got a hole in your pocket, why would you try to put some more money in there? First, you need to close up the hole while you put more money in there, because it's just gonna leak back out, and you're gonna take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps back, and that's really what we're seeing in real terms. Go ahead, bro.
I look at white supremacy as a multi-tentacled hydra, and immigration, and this book has helped me, given me more clarity on one of its arms, right? And I see it as one of the arms of this multi-tentacled hydra that has been weaponized against us. It's been weaponized against us. And Beck is funny, right? Because in this book, it speaks to the Irish in the North, in New York City. And they made a statement along the lines of, oh, man, it's right here in front of me. If ever a conflict arises between the races, the people of the city of New York will stand by their brethren, the white race. We will never suffer you to be trampled upon by those of another blood. These were Irishmen saying this, Irish immigrants in Tammany Hall, which I believe still exists in New York City. That's like the J. Edgar Hoover building, another thing that needs to be deconfederatized. That name needs to be stripped off of everything, in my opinion. But I want to point out, I want to read something real quick. And then we'll get to Ibrahim. It goes back to what Charles Blow was saying in his interview about a balkanization of the immigrant class here in the United States of America in these days and times. Beck gives us in his research how this also happened in a city like New York. For those of you that have been watching this platform, you have heard me say on numerous occasions that I've experienced more racism in New York City. I've been there my whole life. And you got to think, when do you start recognizing racism, right? At what age? I've been down here 13 years. I've experienced more racism in New York City which is my whole life before I moved down here 13 years ago, than the 13 years that I've been down here in Georgia. More racism, family. Brutal. And it's so funny because as I'm reading this book about these people like the Irishmen, these coppers, right? If you know the history of the Irish in New York, well, they become the cops. A lot of the Jews become the lawyers, right? So that's where that term, the Jew lawyer, comes from. And a lot of the judges were largely your run-of-the-mill, foundational, quote-unquote, white Americans, Anglo-Saxons. We had everything against us in that city. But let me read from page 43 in Beck's book. He said, each year, the Republican Party's power in the North eroded. And let's clarify what is meant by Republican Party. Not today's Republican Party. We have to be clear. Today's Republican Party is more like the Democratic Party of yesteryear, the time period in which Beck is specifically speaking of in this book. You got to clarify that, because there are those who intentionally confuse the two, trying to create that angle. So each year, the Republican Party's power in the North eroded as hundreds of thousands of immigrants entered their region, with most throwing their political lot in with the Democratic Party and its strong opposition to Southern Reconstruction. I can pause there and say that every general election, every presidential election, black people vote for the Democratic candidate, today's Democrat, at between an 84 to 90% clip. The other percentage going to either the Republican candidate or some other third party.
Yep, ever since Jesse Jackson.
That's right. That's right. 30% of Hispanics, the people that, and I'm just pointing them out specifically, that Biden says are the future of this country. Those numbers grow, it appears, with every passing presidential election. They vote for the Republican Party. So when I'm reading this, I'm able to contextualize it with what's going on today. So when it says, with most throwing their political lot in with the Democratic Party and its strong opposition to Southern Reconstruction. What was that bill in California, y'all? Prop 8 about affirmative action and how the Asian Americans banded together and helped push an immigrant push in the state of California, where the freedmen population is only 6%. I'm going to always say, get up out of there, family. Just like I say, get up out of New York, where I was born and raised. Just come back south to where our family's from. But they were the ones, I believe that was Prop 8. They were the ones that killed that bill. They used their political power, their political will in the state of California to kill the affirmative action bill at the state level. It didn't benefit them.
Yeah, it was Proposition 209 in the 90s.
No, this was recently. I'm talking.
Oh, that was Prop 16 that they were
Prop
trying
16.
to.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I've been.
Yeah.
It felt like I was saying the wrong bill.
That's all right.
Excuse me.
You had to multiply times too. That's all right. Yeah.
We do get it wrong sometimes over here. Hey, once in a blow. Hey, once.
No, we didn't. We got it right. We got it right.
The bill number was wrong.
No, I mean the team got it right.
The team got it right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
When one of us off, the other one going to make sure the team get it right. That's right.
That's right. So it says the immigrants then streaming into the major cities of the North from all over Europe had no guilty conscience over American slavery and were much more likely to adopt the anti-Reconstruction stance of the Democrats. A number of philanthropic merchants in New York City tried after the war to open the job market up to more black workers, but the power of the immigrant organizations were too strong. Many cities had similar experiences as the burgeoning immigration population was able to form political machines and take control in city governments. If you think about the question that Mr. Engaging asked earlier about what is the greater threat. My particular, I guess my specific answer was the many armed hydra or many tentacled hydra that is white supremacy in this country. New York City allowed this to happen because they saw these Northern Europeans as kinfolk. Say, well, they have skin like ours. Eventually, the Italians became white. They had the Bank of Italy, which is today called the Bank of America. All of these different people have been able to come over here. I'll use this analogy that all the time, that America is the house that every other group gets to come into. They get welcomed into by those who have lineage in the foundation of this country, or what you would call foundational, quote unquote, white Americans, foundational Europeans here in America. And all these other groups come in and they get to pick a room in the mansion and get comfortable. The freedmen, the American blacks, as we're called, we are not even in the house. We are the welcome mat that you wipe your feet upon before entering. I tell this story all the time, and I'm going to tell it again. I was working security for a woman from St. Lucia in a laundromat in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. 98, 99-ish. And I was trying to get loans so that I could buy a dilapidated building. I was fixing my credit. I was doing everything right. Everything right. It's like, I'm going to get this done. I could own a brownstone in Brooklyn. I can accomplish something, and I'm going to get our people, the black folks, from out of the shelters and move them into this brownstone that I'm going to have fixed up with the loans and this and all of it. And this is going to be my special project. I'm going to make sure all of these people eventually get out of this apartment building and go on and be successful in the world. And I kept hitting roadblock after roadblock. Meanwhile, the Jews had started coming into Bedford-Stuyvesant at that time. They were buying these dilapidated buildings for $1, family. $1. Some of these buildings had been dilapidated since I was a child. Because I moved to Queens when I was 6 years old, Far Rockaway, Queens, to be exact. Come back to Brooklyn through the years, you see the same buildings, etc. You see some urban renewal. Certain buildings were just, they were never fixed. The Jews were buying these buildings for $1. I couldn't even get the law. I couldn't get anything. So the woman said to me, her name was Marlene. She said, you American blacks have it much tougher than us blacks from the island. I said, what do you mean? She said, for instance, this is my second laundromat. I've owned 2 daycare centers. She said, it seems like the American government is against you. We come right over here from the islands and set up shop, and we're good. She watched my struggles. I would come in there in the laundromat some days with just stacks of paper, just looking through and start like, what do I have to do to just get ahead in this country? And for those of you who have been following this channel, y'all have heard me tell this particular account from the beginning. But now we have this book right here. I could contextualize it a little bit better. And I pray that some people on the right is watching. I pray that Roy Beck himself is watching, and maybe some of the people that take this immigration issue to heart, because the only thing that the freedmen ever wanted in this country was our slice of the American pie. Mercer Baradaran, in her book, The Color of Money, in what is it? The subtitle, The Issue of Black Banking in America, or something like that. Quotes where it says that the freedmen, and I've always pulled that quote up here, I can pull it up now, that the freedmen made 100 years of progress in 1 year. You take a people that are eager to work, and they're going to work, but you beat these people down over generation after generation after generation after generation up until present day. Go read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. It's not a book that we've done here, but we might do a book review on Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, but it too fits into this cog of book wheels analogy that I'm using here. And they let these people come in here and bypass us.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Brother Ibrahim.
When you think about how certain groups of immigrants band together to do their policy, nobody wants competition when your lives and your livelihood is on the line, right? That's like Katniss Everdeen in Hunger Games. You know, once he gets down to the last two, saying, "Hey, open up the gates and let more competitors in." The Asians in California, you know, Haitians was a big recipient of affirmative action. I believe in California they was the biggest recipient of affirmative action, but they understood that what affirmative action can do for blacks, it had already did for them, and they understood that, like, hey, even though we're taking this away from ourselves, we don't really need it anymore, right? They have, you know, speaking on certain groups, I think the Indians, the Chinese, and the Japanese. I think it goes Indian first, Japanese second, then Chinese. Has the highest income in, you know, the state of California. So they don't need affirmative action like black people desperately need affirmative action. And they say, hey, if we can take this away, if we can take this off the table, black people in California has already been priced out. If we take these government resources off the table, all we have to do is sit back and wait, right? And we take them off the competition board. We get them off the competition board. You know, we can look towards maybe the Filipinos or maybe the Latinos that's coming across the border. But we got blacks on their heels, right? And we know they need this. And that's what we see with other groups, right? Roy Beck in his book, he, you know, speaks to the point that immigrants don't want mass immigration, right? They got over here. They're trying to get a foot in this country. And even when they get a foot in this country, I mean, people understand the racial hierarchy in America. Like, we call them white, but, you know, when you live on the other side of the tracks, you know, like, they'll never fully be white, right? They're white to us, right? They can live a white life. You can walk down the street and not get shot and get bank loans and whatever else. But they understand, you know, there's levels to whiteness, and they're not at the top level. Not yet. Not until whites bring them all the way in, like the Irish, the Italian, you know, so forth and so on. So they understand, like, you know, they don't have, you know, that elite footing in America, you know, that whites get with white privilege, you know, the ability to raise the capital to basically do whatever you want to do and not get kicked out of the country. So, you know, in their group, they're like, hey, we got to fend for ourselves. We have to fend off immigration. And we also got to keep these people on the bottom that's historically been on the bottom. Right. And so when we talk about immigration, it's not us that's being offensive. Right. Other groups have been doing it to us from the very beginning. Right. Before they was made white, they was doing it to us. When you look at gangs in New York, you know, and when you just, you know, read the historical records, there was so many race riots that started over jobs. You know, black people got into the warehouse industry originally as union busters, right? So we've always been made to compete to drive the wage floor down, right? So, you know, and think about this, you know, not as a new immigrant, not as somebody new to a country, but somebody that's had footing in the country before it was established as a country, somebody who actually built the country is now, you know, has to leave out and come back in and compete with everybody new, right? And it's like you just starting over and over and over again. And they bring people in and you got to start over with them and start over with them and start over with them. And the jobs that you used to work, you can no longer work because they got somebody else working it. So you got to start over somewhere else. You know, and Roy Beck specifically focused on the, you know, blue collar worker, the I'm not gonna say the non-educated, because, you know, these jobs is what make America run. Those who don't have a college education, right? Those jobs that don't require a college education. And he specifically focused on that group, but he can go even further, because we know those that do have college education are underemployed when it comes to their peers, are underpaid when it comes to their peers, and just don't have the same opportunities as their peers. I mean, you even have, you know, us freedmen have the highest unemployment among college graduates as well. So we're not just being replaced at the bottom, we're being replaced at the top as well, right? So it's, you know, I know when it comes to a lot of our people, not in this space, not the ones that watch us, but immigration is, for us, it's a slippery slope because we've been taught that if you speak against immigration, if you have things to say, that doesn't benefit immigration, you're a far right winger, right? And we have always had some great immigrant allies, a few peppered in here and there, and we still do. So it doesn't, it's looked at, if you talk about one, you talk about all. But, and that's when you got to go back to, we have enough people in America to sustain America, and we don't have a labor shortage, to work these jobs and build ourselves up. You got too many homeless. We got too many people in prison. We got too many people who have, left prison but still got their scarlet letter and they can't get jobs. We got too many people that's unemployed, that's underemployed, and at this point in time, we do need to, really focus and have an immigration overhaul in America to focus on the people that's already there and the quality of life that they should be living by being an American citizens. And freedmen should be at the front of that line when it comes to that discussion, and at the front of that line when it comes to the opportunities. So, we got to pull back and reevaluate our politics. Do we want to be the bottom caste in this country? Do we want to be the people that's not intentional about our politics? Do we want to be reactive instead of proactive? These are things we really have to tell ourselves, because politics is vicious, and we'll continue to get left behind if we are over empathetic and over sympathetic to other groups' plight and not look at our own.
That's right, Josh. I want you to come in, but just give me 1 second. Right. I want two things I want to point out. One is in the chat, and I just want to read something real short from Beck's book before I pull up your screen. Okay, Muffet Nellen. What's going on, bro? He says this. Hey guys, I'm up in New Jersey. I just discovered something else happening. My family just volunteered at a food pantry. They observed the Haitians and Nigerians heading the program, redirecting the majority of food to people they know, and giving the people of the city who need the food a small amount. In Beck's book, he speaks about this thing called ethnic networking. See, I wanted to get into some of that tonight. That's why I said we go have to go tomorrow, because I know how these things go.
I already knew when you seen that where you was going to. Yeah.
Right?
See, that's gonna be way too heavy. And
that's right.
And it's gonna be some real shocking stuff.
That's right.
Like when I read some of that stuff, bro, I was shocked. I was like, what?
That's right. That's right. And Shabazz Navarro said this, I call it the bookends, right? He says, I can tell you firsthand that we are in a pincer move, being squeezed at the top and the bottom. I wanted to read from this paper about.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into it. Go ahead.
But I'm not. Because for the sake of time, I'm gonna let you go in, Josh. So I'm not gonna get into the paper on diversity for diversity's sake. What's the name of that joint? But what I am going to do is I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to put it in the chat. When diversity for diversity's sake is not enough, should Black immigrants receive the benefit of affirmative action at the detriment of Native Blacks? I mean, this is such a powerful read. I have several screenshots of this that I wanted to read from the night. I should have known that I wasn't, because it never happens that way, because the way these conversations go. But maybe tomorrow night I'll be able to get into some of it. So let me read this real quick, Josh, and then I'm going to pull your screen up. This is from page 44 from Beck's book, Back of the Hiring Line, a 200-year history of immigration surges, employer bias, and depression of Black wealth. Farley, professor of, let me see. Nah, I'll start them there. Farley, professor of African American history at the State University of New York, Brockport, said black residents not only lost their jobs to the new immigrants, quote, but the immigrants took up residence in city wards where their numerical majority made the black population politically impotent, excuse me. Y'all hear us preach about moving back south. Get out of New York. I tell people that all the time. And I don't know how my peoples that's in this movement from Cali feel when I say get out of Cali, right? I don't know. But I was born and raised in New York City. My accent screams New York. My swagger screams New York City. But I'm a freedman, first and foremost. And I put the political well-being of my people first. F New York. Middle finger to it. Period. I tell my family. I was telling my daughter yesterday, trying to convince her to move her dude and my grandbaby to move back south. Let's move back south. It's where our families are from. So let me finish. It says, across the North and precincts with heavy immigrant settlement, votes on issues and candidates turned against the interest of both Northern and Southern Black Americans. The hopes of ex-slaves in the South were dashed in Northern cities that not only were losing interest in equal rights in the South, but were creating stronger anti-Black systems in the North. New York State emerged from the post-war deliberations not with an acceptance of equality for African Americans, but with a definition of and acceptance of the idea of segregation, Farley wrote. So while they were trying to desegregate in the South with federal policy mandates, if you will, New York City decided that segregation was a good thing. And immigrants flooding over here through the ports, moving into these residences, many of them still white today. There's a Polish part of New York, Jewish, many Jewish parts of New York. You go to certain parts of Brooklyn, it's all West Indians, all Jamaicans and Trinidadians, etc. And the freedmen live in squalor because we've not been able to advance up the ladder of economic mobility due to not just immigration, but racism in and of itself. But when you put this piece to the puzzle, this missing piece of immigration into the mix, then you gain a little more clarity. It's a little bit more. It's like having bad vision and putting a pair of eyeglasses on for the first time with the right prescription. Oh, I can see everything. And that's what this immigration piece has done to me. I mean, we got somebody in the chat. Josh, wait a minute, real quick. Let me pull this up. This is EYB Entertainment. Nobody can give you competition if you own and control where we live. Competition is felt when we look at others to give us jobs. EYB Entertainment. Freedmen have to create jobs and stop relying on others to employ them. You know, EYB Entertainment, the main book that we come out of on this platform over the past year, some change, has been From Here to Equality. When it comes to the harms that have been inflicted upon the body of the freedmen as a whole, this book is second to none. You know, when it comes to highlighting those harms, right? We've talked about the bloody shirt. While we've not reviewed Mercer Baradaran's book, The Color of Money, we've spoke on it ad nauseum here on this channel. We've spoken on a great deal of scholastic works that shows us that that bootstrapperism talk is just something that you type in the chat. It's not something that's real or tangible. It's not real.
Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Even in bootstrapperism, even if you're trying to talk about entrepreneurship, the whole thing is based on competition. If you're in business, you have competition. You know, that's why you have to be strategic in business. In business, it's about location. You know, a lot of times we talk about having a business, a tangible, not a click and order business, but a brick and mortar business. But even click and order, location is still important because you got to have placement. You have to have the location in front of the eyes of the people as far as marketing, so you can get customers. Same thing. So that location has competition built into that because you're competing with everybody else, not only around you, but everybody else that's contributing to the market forces that results in the prices that you have to pay for rent, for supplies, for labor that you need to contract to run your business. So that's just not. It's something that maybe people say, and you may have been trained to think to believe a certain thing, but it's not really how business or society operates in real life.
It's not how business works in America. I mean, that's not how you scale up. We're talking about opportunity. You just don't build a business and it becomes like the next Facebook or the next Google, right? That's years of like connections that's anchored into that stuff. There's years of banking and hedge fund managers and investment bankers and people that can we've been through this. We've built businesses. We've built successful businesses. We've built successful communities or business districts in communities, and we've seen what happened to it. It's just fictional talk. This is 21st century America. That's not how business runs. That's not how business works. And it's disrespect to the Freedmen ancestors who did everything they could do, and they were sabotaged by the most powerful government in this country. The government that goes into other countries and destroys all of their businesses and their way of life. So it's extremely short-sighted, and it's extremely disrespectful to what we've built, what we have gone against in the country, and the fight that we still fighting. That's not it. Like by his logic, right? The Asian community just came in and outcompeted Black hair care businesses and took over the hair care industry, right? But like we know that's not how it happened, right? We was undercut by government, by their government and by our government. But that's how business works in America. So you read some of this stuff, and it's kind of remedial, but people need this recurring training. And a lot of people just don't have it yet, and it's sad to say. And I'll end by saying this, you'll say, pull yourself up by your bootstrap, create jobs, do this, do that. And I see the same people go and praise Black businessmen who are, propped up by white capital, right? Like you'll go praise a Jay-Z, a Oprah, a Kanye West, a Floyd Mayweather, all of these Black, quote unquote business people, marketing people, if you ask me, but you'll go praise them as entrepreneurs when they're propped up by white capital, so, you just got to understand business in America. And that's a extremely short-sighted view on how business works in America.
That's right. Yeah, Josh, I'm gonna pull your screen up, bro.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I want to just I don't know if everybody can see that.
Yeah.
Pretty well. Okay. Yeah, this is chapter 24. We're not going in chronological order in the book. We just kind of skipping around, just talking.
It's too much to get to.
Yeah, it's way too much. We'll be here all
night. We could go 5 days a week.
Yeah.
5. Then we may cover what needs to be covered. But this is what the book reviews
I gotta echo
about.
what you said, bro. I gotta echo what you said. Like this is a missing piece.
That's right.
We were all saying that, like, you know, the freedman identity was a huge piece. The, you know, understanding the where we are as a specific group of people that's under this the status of freedmen. That's a huge piece. And then also understanding where we are statistically, that's a huge piece. Having that as a way to like bring clarity to the reparations argument, and you know, pretty much from here to equality, that is a masterful piece. And I'm not trying to say that in the same sentence to make a comparison between the two books. I would just say this book, it added an element that made a lot of things very clear. It just kind of tied a lot of things together, and I appreciate that from this book, because again, I just look at it like having a hole in your pocket. But I wanted to talk about, you know, we started earlier, and when I first came on, when you probably first heard me, I was saying there was a debate talking about, you know, I was having a gripe, you know, when I was first reading the book, I was like, who is this Beck guy? I don't know anything about him. I read some stuff that people wrote about him, and you probably shouldn't do that. You probably should inspect it on your own. But, you know, I was like, let me just keep an eye out for the angle, like Nyhiem was saying. So when I saw that middle class piece, I was like, okay. And I was like, you know, what's missing here is to actually show how the freedmen got to the position that they are outside of immigration policy. And I appreciated chapter 20, was it chapter 24? Because it actually, that was when it finally like he covered it in a you know, a way that I found that was good, it was satisfactory. And he talked about, you know, he ran down the history really quickly. And basically he was saying that 55 years after racial apartheid was abolished in the United States with the passage of the Federal Civil Rights Act, and after a half century of affirmative action programs, the wealth gap was 18-1. So he's finally talking about the, you know, wealth gap. He brought the whole year, the whole history together. And he says what I was saying right here. Wealth is this is a Brookings report. Wealth is a safety net that keeps life from being derailed by temporary setbacks and the loss of income. This safety net allows people to take career risks, knowing that they have a buffer when success is not immediately achieved. Family wealth allows people, especially young adults who have recently entered the labor force, to access housing in safe neighborhoods with good schools, thereby enhancing the prospects of their own children. Wealth affords people opportunities to be entrepreneurs and inventors. So right there, what does it say? Wealth affords people opportunities to be entrepreneurs and inventors. It doesn't say, you know, ideology affords people opportunities.
That's right.
What I believe on that I heard from somebody that was giving me some propaganda that's coming out of the co-opting of the Black Power movement.
That's right.
Richard Nixon, and that propaganda has been persistent, even in Black spaces. You know, like some of your religious organizations. I'm not gonna call the names, but we know some of them that gave gag orders and speaking against the Richard Nixon administration when he was putting that propaganda out. But see, it says wealth affords people opportunities to be entrepreneurs and inventors. So if you got it, he just talked about how we've been locked out of wealth. We've been denied opportunity to wealth. Our wealth was stolen for all of this time, and so now we see there's a huge gap. And so I'm gonna skip. He talks about the Freedmen's Bank being robbed.
That's right.
And all that kind of stuff. Now he says here, while government banking and societal practices have taken wealth from Black communities before wealth could grow, federal high immigration, loose labor policies have taken wealth from Black communities before it's even earned.
Woo.
Let me read that again.
Before it's even earned.
Banking and societal practices have taken wealth from Black communities before the wealth could grow. Federal high immigration and loose labor policies have taken wealth from the Black communities before it is even earned. Loose labor immigration policies deny income to Black households by facilitating reduction of African Americans in jobs And the depression of wages increases, the depression of wage increases for those who have jobs. This kind of taking of Black potential wealth has been occurring for the majority of 165 years since the end of slavery and is in full force today. Without sufficient access to jobs and continuous incomes year by year, decade by decade, there can be no foundation for the generational accumulation of net assets. So what he's trying to say is, if you are constantly you're trying to, build, you're trying to have some like over the course of generations and over the course of a lifetime, you're trying to build, but you keep getting undercut, you keep getting the rug snatched up from underneath you, and that's a large story of America's immigration policy. Now, this is key right here. Subtle discrimination against upward mobility into professions. So we've talked a lot about the lower income jobs, the lower, blue collar jobs, but let's talk about elsewhere. So as part of the reason for such a dramatically lower Black wealth is the smaller percentage of African Americans who do have jobs, are employed in higher paid professions. So we have very few of us there. This book is focused primarily on the way immigration policies have reduced or denied incomes for African Americans who, like 2/3 of all Americans, don't have a college degree. But we should at least note here the tendency of today's immigration flows to impede the movement of Black youth into higher skilled careers and professions. Soon after Congress restarted mass immigration in 1965, a federal commission warned of the more subtle form of discrimination that made it easier for employers to hire foreign-born professionals instead of encouraging underrepresented minority youth to pursue those careers. In its recommendations to cap immigration flows at less than half of the annual level since 1990, the Commission on Population Growth and the American Future stated in its report, a readily available source, quote, a readily available source of trained professionals from other countries may slow the development of domestic talents and the expansion of training facilities. While this importation of talent may be economical for the United States, it is not fair either to the foreign countries that educate the professionals or to our own citizens, particularly those minority groups, freedmen, and women who, women are free. We have women too in our freedmen group, whose access to professional training and economic advancement has been limited, end quote. Now, peep this. Known as the Rockefeller Commission, it observed that American minorities and women in general had traditionally been discriminated against and denied opportunities to upgrade their skills. It specifically commented on the refusal or inability of the medical and higher education establishments to expand enrollments to meet the country's need for doctors. Fully qualified American students were denied careers in medicine because there weren't enough slots in the medical schools. Instead, physicians were imported from other countries. The commission wrote, quote, a flow of highly trained immigrants can mask the need for developing and promoting domestic talents. For example, in the medical field, although medical schools have recently been expanding enrollments, a significant portion of demand for doctors is being met by immigrants trained abroad. Now, this is in I don't remember what year this was. It doesn't say, but it wasn't that long ago. It says a significant proportion of demand for doctors is being met by immigrants trained abroad. It appears that without the availability of these foreign doctors, the medical schools would be under great pressure to increase their enrollment and to provide more educational opportunities for all Americans, particularly minorities and women. They don't want to say freedmen. That's not attractive. The fact that there are more registered Filipino doctors than Black doctors practicing in the United States shows the inequities that can arise. Now, every Congress since 1990 has ignored those warnings as the government has allowed more and more higher skilled foreign workers, largely blocking significantly increased movement of African Americans into those occupations. The excuse of personnel departments for importing so many foreign professionals is that the United States, a country, listen how retarded it sounds, a country of more than 330 million people doesn't have enough young people who are interested enough, smart enough, or hardworking enough to earn the degrees and enter those professions. What?
As I was saying earlier, y'all would rather import people that barely could speak the damn English language, put them into a place like a college like Athens Tech, a community college like Athens Tech, give them the skills, then thrust them into the workforce while you already have a labor pool right here in a place like Athens, Georgia, where Athens Tech is located.
You know, there's a really great article by the Boston Globe. They did about 5 years of research from valedictorians from public high schools, and I believe they only did the ones that wanted to be doctors, right? And they checked back on them like 10 years later, and I believe only one of them had a path to becoming a physician, and that was an immigrant. I think one went to prison, one had been like murdered or something. Like, it was very tragic, right? And these were valedictorians, right? So, like, when you think about this, you can destroy the pipeline and say, hey, we don't even need that. We don't need this stuff in our, state colleges. We don't really need it in our HBCUs. We'll just have this for the elite that can really afford it, and for the other ones, we'll outsource this. We'll outsource this career, from abroad, and it really erodes like the fabric of our education system, because now that opportunity isn't there no more for many people who want it. And when you think about valedictorians that couldn't do it, right? Like, these are the people who graduated at the top of their class. What does that say for all the other, smart, intelligent young minds that wanted to follow in this career, right? It just destroys the whole pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And this one is talking about, I'm going to just paraphrase it so I'm not going to read the whole thing. Well, basically it says like that a lot of the top prestigious research universities were turning out Freedmen graduates in computer science and computer engineering at twice the rate that leading technologies companies hire them. And then it talks about a study of diversity in 2017 in the tech industry found that Black and Hispanic Americans combined comprise only 5.3% of professionals. So it just goes to show you that, again, go back to the question that says, well, is it white supremacy or immigration? Well, like you kind of see, like Brother Nyhiem said, it's a tentacle, is one of the tentacles, because, they use immigration as a means to keep you boxed out, and to where they don't have to use the freedmen to hire, and you can kind of get around some of the call for diversity by letting other groups in, and you don't have to hire freedmen. Another one, it says Blacks and Latinos earn nearly 18% of computer science degrees, yet hold barely 5% of tech jobs. And it was talking about HBCUs, constantly throughout the generations, turned out a lot of graduates in a lot of these fields, but they're not getting hired. It says leaders of HBCUs told members of Congress and federal agency officials that high-skilled graduates of their schools were readily available to fill high-tech jobs that are currently going to foreign workers. Those schools graduate more than a quarter of all Black students with bachelor's degrees in STEM. They have long complained that the job fairs for their students have gotten poor participation from Silicon Valley firms. I'm sure there's people in the chat that can attest to that. I know I can. Employers throughout the STEM fields have preferred to meet their diversity goals with non-white professionals from other countries rather than hiring African Americans. High-skilled visas for foreign professionals created all-around winning situation for these companies. Samara Lynn wrote on Black Enterprise. By hiring workers on H-1B visas, they receive cheaper labor, and it can also point to their brown-skinned engineers and claim that diversity boost. That's what I'm talking about, that brown stuff,
right,
man.
That's right. Josh, let me read something real quick. I want to camelback off of what you are reading, and this is from the paper from When Diversity for Diversity's Sake is Not Enough, Should Black Immigrants Receive the Benefit of Affirmative Action at the Detriment of Native Blacks? Because Beck speaks of that, what was that, 5.3%, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that in that 5.3% of those people that are in that field, though a relatively low number, what does that 5.3% Black people comprise of? Because Federal Directive 15 is clear when it says that in Federal Directive 15 is the racial classifications in the United States of America, where it essentially says, and I paraphrase, that Black is anybody who descends from any of the Black racial groups from Africa. It is one of the vaguest and most ambiguous definitions out of the 5 classifications. And Josh was speaking about those classifications earlier, right? So from this paper, it reads, furthermore, you know what? I'm going to start here. Diversity of student experiences within a student body helps to break down deeply held stereotypes of certain minority groups held by both Black and non-Black students who will likely go on to become leaders in American society. In a society where a long history of racial division has led to the dominant culture often viewing all Black people as the same, admitting disproportionate numbers of Black immigrants dilutes the intended effect of diversity when the Black immigrants attending an institution also hold negative stereotypes of Native Blacks and are overrepresented within a student population. Students attending these institutions may look to those immigrants as representing the quote-unquote Black American experience. Think of Joy Reid. Joy Reid is of Ghanaian and some other descent. But when she speaks of Black people, she always says we and us, right? When she speaks of the times of slavery and of Jim Crow, the Jim Crow laws, right? Because Jim Crow was a set of laws. We often say Jim Crow without really fleshing out what Jim Crow was. It was deeper than just this term Jim Crow. There was a lot of different racist, oppressive laws that were enacted that were later called Jim Crow laws, right? But she always includes herself as we and us when she's not we and us. And because these colleges and universities are selective in their process when choosing the Blacks that they want to attend their prestigious universities, I guess, then this Blackness thing becomes blurred. So let me read this other paragraph. It says, furthermore, I can hear somebody typing.
I thought I was on mute.
I'll be typing too. I have to catch myself.
I see Otis comment, and I was like,
oh, okay.
Let me type my response.
Okay. It says, furthermore, attending a selective institution can open many doors to its graduates, particularly Black graduates. Graduating from a top-tier institution can lead to higher incomes. These higher incomes are likely associated with the beneficiaries of affirmative action obtaining employment where Blacks were historically and are presently underrepresented. The overrepresentation of the Black immigrant perspective compared to that of Native Blacks at selective institutions could result in further repercussions, such as in workplace diversity, where Black immigrants displace Native Blacks, not only at selective colleges and universities, but also in these future employment opportunities. Those Black immigrants would carry with them very different perspectives than those of Native Blacks. This is key. And I'm going to get a little, I see your comment in the back channel, Ibrahim. I'm going to, tomorrow night, I may get a little deeper into this paper as it relates to many of the points that Beck highlights in his book, Back of the Hiring Line, for anybody that's just joining us, a 200-year history of immigration surges, employer bias, and depression of Black wealth. this paper is crucial. This particular paper is crucial. I want to put the link again in the chat just in case anybody is just joining us. I want you to read that paper, right? Because not only have we been replaced by white immigrants, we've also been replaced by black immigrants. And Beck also notes this in his book. But one thing, let me read something else from this paper that this paper highlights. It says, the continued admission of large proportions of black immigrants relative to native black goes against an important diversity rationale in Gruder versus Bollinger. And make sure y'all look up that case. That it's a very important case that deals with affirmative action. A cornerstone of the diversity rationale in Gruder, which allowed the use of race-based preferences in higher education admissions policies, was to create an environment of diverse experiences that would help to dispel negative stereotypes held of certain minority groups. Black immigrants have now become an overrepresented group within black populations at many colleges and universities, particularly at more selective institutions. This trend is significant because black immigrants bring with them experience and perspectives similar to those held by other immigrant groups as compared to native blacks. And more importantly, black immigrants harbor views of native blacks that are similar to those held by the dominant American culture, including many of the negative stereotypes of native blacks and the black subculture. By dominant society, they mean racist white America. Just to be clear, if any of you have been following what's been going on Clubhouse for the past year and Twitter Spaces for the past 2 months, you'll see what's said when it says, including many of the negative stereotypes of native blacks and the black subculture. Many people from African countries, particularly the Nigerians, who have adopted the Ghanaian West African word of Akata, which means wild African. It's akin to calling black folks niggers, basically. This term Akata by the Africans. They are all over these Twitter Spaces and social media calling us slaves and monkeys and all types of things that you would hear in 1800 and early 1900, well, not even early 1900, America. These same black people that are selected by these selective institutions, you know, because they'll see a Keisha Jones or Jamar Jackson and say no, but they'll see a Olum Tunje Umbakwa and be like, yes, sure, bring in Olum Tunje. Yes, we don't want Keisha Jones or, you know, and this paper gets deep. And again, Beck also highlights some of this element in his book as well. So, and we may touch on that in depth tomorrow night. Brother Ibrahim, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. There's also like a economic benefit to that. A lot of the foreign exchange students or the students that come over here and do schooling, they're paying for school. But you know what never cease to amazes me, and I've been seeing this recently in the Twitter Spaces, you know, that was started off talking about immigration that became somehow Black Americans versus African immigrants, that you'll see people call in, right? They've never been to America, you know, they have no intention of moving to America, and they'll call in and they'll have these racist views about Black. I'm like, right. Whoa, like you got these racist views about Black Americans. You never lived here. You've never came across Black American culture in mass. Now, you probably ran across a few Black Americans that was vacationing in your country, but like that really amazes me that somebody will call in from Nigeria or a Black Brit will call in from the UK, right? And they'll say, you know, I just wanted to say this, you know, y'all lazy, y'all
stupid, you uneducated. And this has been happening in some of the spaces recently in the last few weeks on Twitter. And I'm like, wow. Like, like I'm calling in from the UK. I just wanted to say this and just really get the, going at, our group of people. So I just thought that was interesting. But like when you bring these elites here, this is a lot of what you have to deal with, regardless of the facts of what you have is a person that's, new to America getting acclimated on, what black is, what benefits they can get for themselves and how they can anchor themselves into the struggle while having, the mentality that, hey, I'm extremely different, I have a different culture, I have a different wealth position, I have a different lineage, everything about me is different. But soon as I came over here, I learned that, hey, I could be the same until I don't need to be the same. And I just thought that was interesting. There was a pretty popular black immigrant imam that said, hey, man, I remember being in high school and everybody was black. Y'all was wearing do-rags and you knew your hair would never wave up. And they say, everybody wanted to be black until they grew up. Then they, migrated into their ethnicity. And I appreciate him for pointing that out, And if you read the comment section, a lot of people just automatically, these really smart people just turn dumb. Like, what do you mean? I don't understand this. Could you give me more, could you elaborate more on this? But, it's just interesting that we have to do politics differently, family. And we have to reach out to our people, and and we have to push the left. We have to push the left, because that's where we mostly vote. We have to push the left to do immigration reform acts. We have to push the left to do immigration differently. And that's why we have to weaponize this data. That's why we have to weaponize this data for that.
I just don't. I remember looking, what's her name? Yvette Clark, I think it is, or Yvette Brown from New York City. I could be saying her name wrong. I remember scrolling through, I think she's a House rep, scrolling through her whole Twitter page. I didn't see one thing about reparations, right? First and foremost. But almost every other tweet was about immigration. It was something about immigrants. I just don't see the left, even when we listen to, what was the brother's name from Louisiana?
Chambers.
That's right. He said some good things on the Breakfast Club. But one of the things he said about immigrants, I think he said immigrants are not taking our jobs or something.
Yeah, you're correct.
Right? This is a left talking point. We have a whole book now that shows that not only are immigrants taking our jobs, they've been taking our jobs for the longest by acts of Congress. Martin Luther King Jr. said by an act of Congress, the United States of America was giving away millions of acres of land to white European peasants whom they undergirded with land-grant colleges, taught them how to farm, and then mechanized their farms. The government did this. And they told us, get back to the back of the line. After we get finished, that's right. After we get finished training these white immigrants, then we'll let you get some. And then as soon as we got to the front of the line, they said, we shouldn't be able to help you or have to help you with anything. You should be able to do it on your own. I believe it's called rugged individualism. Rugged individualism, AKA pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. This was a rallying cry after Reconstruction. Do not give the Negroes anything. One of the things that Dr. Darity and A. Kirsten Mullen highlight in their book, From Here to Equality, was the system of welfare and how white America, they basically built themselves up into a middle class off of America's welfare system. Then, while they were doing that, they excluded the freedmen out from this system They excluded us from this system, excuse me, for 30 years. So white America, as they're called, got a 30-year head start with government welfare. Government welfare, however that looked back in the 1920s and 30s, I think it started in the 30s. 30 years we were boxed out. As soon as the United States government opened it up to the freedmen, white folks started to complain and said they should be able to go out there and work like we work now. Forget about the fact that your father or grandfather benefited from welfare programs and you had every advantage given to you because of your skin tone. You were white. Forget about that fact. The fact that freedmen are now included in receiving this particular safety net. Oh, it's this bad thing. Ronald Reagan used that. He used one, it's hard to say anecdote. He cherry picked. I hear an echo coming from your mic, Ibrahim. He cherry picked a situation of welfare fraud where this one black woman they called, Ronald Reagan made her the welfare queen. And then there was the one brother, but that wasn't welfare, but that was something, I can't think of it at the moment. My thoughts are jumbled trying to stick to one point while thinking about other points as they pop up in my head. But he calls her the welfare queen. Oh, this stirred white America into a frenzy. Black people need to be cut off of welfare. They did a documentary in the 80s in Newark, I think it was Newark, New Jersey, about these welfare mothers, these welfare single mothers, and how black men weren't there for them, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that Beck notes in this book, and I had that highlighted as well, I probably won't be able to find it or rip, was it talked about jobs and wages. Like, how are you able to earn a living when you can't earn a living because you're constantly boxed out and blocked out of employment opportunities? So, as we come to a close, okay, here's one of them. Let me read, right? Because he says this on page 16. Okay, let me start here, and then I'm going to go to the bros, and then we can start winding this thing down. Page 16. Other factors behind black inequality will be referenced throughout this book. But we should take note here of one that is cited by scholars across the spectrum. 2 of every 3 black children now live in a single-parent household. The importance of that change in family structure has been emphasized by a wide range of public figures, including President Barack Obama. I think he just added Barack Obama in there for added effect. That's my theory. Barack Obama was horrible. He was just horrible. Who spoke about an often referenced analysis of census data. Adults who grew up in a single-parent household are 5 times more likely to live in poverty than adults raised in a 2-parent household. 5 times more likely. The percentage of children growing up in a single-parent household in the United States has risen rapidly since 1970 among all races. The rate has been fastest for white children, having tripled. Nonetheless, the white rate is still only about half that of the black rate, which has doubled since 1970. Most studies have found that income and not race is the determining factor behind changes in family formation. Most studies, not all. I would have some contention there, but this is his book and we're citing it. Non-college degree Americans of all races have seen their real income stagnate or decline during the last several decades of loose labor markets. But no group has been hit harder than black men. On page 17, he says, matter of fact, no, I'm going to read finish reading from 16 to 17. The change in household structure did not occur in isolation from the major economic changes of the last half century. And no change in that period may have been greater than the quadrupling, not the doubling or the tripling, but the quadrupling of immigration and its loosening of labor markets. By depressing job opportunities and wages for young Black men without college degrees, sustained immigration surges have made it less likely that young men can even imagine having the income to marry and take responsibility for a family. Federal data in 2018 showed that 42% of all Black men aged 25 to 34 earned less than $25,100 needed to provide for a family of four above the poverty line. How could family formation occur in those kinds of conditions? Asked Roger Wilkins when presented with similar bleak statistics in the 1990s. Wilkins, the highest ranking African American in the Johnson administration, complained to National Public Radio. We hear people talking about Black families falling apart, but we don't hear anybody talking about putting Black men to work, giving Black families the economic wherewithal to stay together and raise their children. Economic historians Lindard and Williamson identified 5 major factors over the last half century that have caused the great rise of U.S. inequality and the depression of income on the bottom rungs of the employment ladder. One of those factors was the rapid growth in the labor force that was primarily caused by immigration. I mean, I could read most of this, and this Frank Morris, a former director of the Congressional Black Caucus, he cites saying immigration is not the cause of all the problems, but it has made the situation much, much worse. The late great Barbara Jordan is also cited in this book. We're going to get to our sister tomorrow and what she was pushing and how she was vehemently opposed to this open border policy that the Democrats today are pushing, and the right wing, the Republicans, pretend like they're against because it riles up the base, but obviously they are for because they are invested in the United States of America in a way that many are unaware of, and immigrant labor and prison labor drives their bottom line. And it's as simple as that. So, bros, y'all have anything to share? I'm gonna close out the reading. There's just so much more to go through. We've been on for a couple hours. I mean, I can go on for another 3 hours, but we're not.
There was a study that I once read talking about a correlation between mass immigration and Black male incarceration rates. And I'll just say, when he says, this is more of a financial thing than an immigration thing, there's a great study by Brookings Institute that say, hey, even Black men, 70% of Black boys born into the middle class will fall out. So it's more than just like a class-based thing, right? It's the levers of systemic racism that pulls us down. And I'll just end by saying this, I won't even call my vote a protest vote. Like, if you want to talk to me on the left, you got to talk to me about immigration. But I'm not even gonna lie. Like my vote will probably be with the right, because we got to do something about immigration, right? We got too many skid rows popping up all around the country, right? So that's where I'm at. And anybody on the left, if you want to talk to me, you got to talk to me about immigration. And the Black agenda, if you can't talk about that, I don't want to hear about HR 1. I don't want to hear about HR 5. I don't want to hear about nothing else you got to say. I don't want to hear about how we got to win the House and the Senate. I'm going to help you lose because I'm voting right. And I'm just ending on that for tonight.
I gave a Matrix analogy earlier, and I'm going to give another one. in the Matrix, in the final, well, they have a new one out now. Many people didn't like it. I try my best to write movie scripts, so I more look at the scripts now than I do at the entertainment value of the movie. And I understood the script, and in that I kind of liked it. But I ain't gonna give no movie review on the last Matrix right now. But in part 3 of the trilogy, the original trilogy, Neo, a blinded Neo, blinded by Agent Smith, right? Those of us who are freedmen, we could identify Agent Smith in so many ways when looking at white supremacy, right? But we're not going to do that. But I'm just giving an analogy right now. Neo realizes that he has to go to the machine city. It's a part of the premonitions that he is having as the one. It's like, I have to go. And the machine city, naturally, they sense one of the ships approaching, and Neo, honors KS Reloaded for the contribution to the platform. They sense, Neo coming, and they throw everything at him. They throw all of the bombs and the ships and the sentinels to try to stop Neo from reaching the computer mainframe, where the Oracle told him he must go. He must go. And the architect, I believe, told him he had to go to the computer mainframe to disseminate the code that he carries so that he could restart the matrix. Anyway, he finally reaches where the main brain of the computer machine network is. It's like this big sun-looking object that comes up. And Neo says something, I'm paraphrasing, I'm trying to remember the lines. He says, the agent, I think the machine asks him, what do you want? Or something like that. Or why are you here? And Neo says, the program, Smith, has grown out of your control. And basically, I can kill him. I can put a stop to him. And the computer mainframe thing, brain voice screams out, we don't need you. And Neo says, well, if that's the case, then I've made a mistake. You should kill me now. And all of the sentinels, they swirl around Neo in a threatening posture. But they don't kill Neo, because obviously the computer mainframe realizes that the program Smith has grown out of their control, and they cannot do anything to control him. And soon he would be taking over their systems as well. The balance, what did the Oracle say? The equation trying to balance itself out. That's what Agent Smith represented. And so the machine thing, brain, sun talking voice thing, asks Neo, what do you want? And Neo says, peace. Peace, right? And eventually Neo goes in and kills Agent Smith. And the machine thing, voice, sun thing, talking, I don't know what the hell to call it. It honored its word, basically. You go in and kill the machine. You go in and get rid of Agent Smith, and I'm going to grant you peace. And I camel back off of what my brother Ibrahim just said about, if he has to even vote right. I'm not saying I'm going to vote right. I can't see me voting for those people. I just can't see that. But everybody's vote is personal. But I'm certainly not voting left. And I didn't really vote left on the last election. I left the top of the ticket open. I voted in the local elections for the people that I knew that were running on a Democratic ticket out here, right? So we have to realize that we are neo in this situation. We are neo in this situation. The agent, the program Smith, which is basically the Democratic Party, and it's trying to be politically correct here. I'm gonna say its programs is infecting the whole system. I can't watch a movie. I can't turn on a TV. I can't even watch a damn commercial without seeing things that are antithetical to family and family structure. That is the program, Smith, that is turning everybody into another Agent Smith. You, me too. All of a sudden, like I said, I'm trying to be politically correct right now for specific reasons, because y'all know I go in when I go in. But right now, I'm just trying to drive a particular message home that there's only one way to destroy the program that is Agent Smith. I'm not gonna speak on it right now, but I'm gonna let those that are listening in that represent the power of the computer machine mainframe, I'm gonna let them figure that part out. Because we all have children, and we all have families, and we are all watching the value system of America, even when we were excluded from that value system by some of these very people that represent the machine, computer, mainframe, brain, sun thing, talking contraption, or whatever it's called. I'm going to leave that for y'all to figure out. But it's providence while we're here doing what we're doing today and resurrecting this freedman identity and reversing the teachings of the lost cause. And this particular book, The Back of the Hiring Line by Roy Beck, is critical because it destroys the talking points, as I said earlier, of the McWhorters, of the Thomas Sowells, of the Coleman Hughes, of the Candace Owenses, the black, I don't even know what to call them. We are so used to calling people Uncle Toms on the left, or Sambos, because Uncle Tom was actually a hero in the original story. The South, they reversed that story so that they could, make Uncle Tom the villain or the sellout. Anybody could go look that up. But anyway, I wanted to drive that point home, and I'm gonna give it up to some of my brothers to give some final thoughts before we close it out.
My final thought is the book is heavy. I put the link in the chat for anybody who hasn't got a copy of the book. If you haven't, you need to get it. You should read it. It's great that we do this program, and you probably heard or will hear other people to do breakdowns of the book in the future. But you want to read it for yourself. It hits way harder. And it's something you can go and reference. Everybody has their preference. I like the Kindle version just because when I'm doing this, I can save the notes and I could just easily highlight it and go back and just type the word in the search and go back and reference it. So I can easily bring up the point that I want to make on the screen. But if you're a person that just can't rock with looking at a screen and read a book like that, I feel you get you the paperback. But you need to get the book. I look forward to going in on some more of this book tomorrow. But, one of the things we got to understand is when we're having a conversation with our people, it's and everybody else. It's a conversation that needs to continuously be had and brought up. But the way to bring the conversation up is to talk about the damaging policy. Because when I don't care if you talk who you're talking to, is unless you're talking to a person that's capitalizing off of a large amount of foreign workers being brought in, that and they're capitalizing in a way of employing these people at a wage or a salary or whatever that is below what people should be getting paid, then you're talking to somebody who should be agreeing with your position. If they're not agreeing with your position, it's just because they've been propagandized. And it's not hard to be propagandized. You turn on the news media, you get on social media, and there's a campaign by those same people that control industry, right? The same people that's controlling, Facebook and Apple and McDonald's, all these major advertisers. You understand, like McDonald's, like think about that. I was thinking about this earlier because I was thinking like, okay, if we need the policy to change, but who are the corporate interests that stand to benefit from increased immigration? It's the largest corporations. Walmart stands to benefit. Why? Because they're the largest employer. And as the population grows, the demand for jobs grows. And when the demand is high, the price is high. So the cost that it's going to cost you as a person that wants something, you're going to have to pay a higher cost to have the job, which means you're going to get less wages because the job is that much more valuable for you. So if it's that much more valuable, you should be willing to take less money. Essentially, that's what happens. It's basic economics. And so, yeah, McDonald's, Walmart, Amazon, these are all companies that benefit from a overinflated immigration policy and bringing way more workers over. You think about Apple and Google and all these big companies. They benefit when they can bring a bunch of people from India and China and pay them less money. And it's not as advantageous situation as if you were a citizen, and it's particularly if you are an American that's been here for multiple generations. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to. This is a conversation that is in their best interest to understand this information and to put pressure on whoever they can to change our immigration policy. This should help. This book is a tool to give you what you need to be able to have those conversations and not letting them devolve into some type of cultural back and forth. See, y'all Africans this, y'all Chinese folks this, y'all, y'all have brought the coronavirus, all this kind of stuff. Like, what I'm saying? Like this book will give you the tools to help you avoid having the conversation in that way that always ends up non-productive and got people going at each other all day in circular, right? Right when you're having a conversation using what this book is talking about, you can actually finish the conversation and be like, you know what, I feel you on that. You're right. And that's the kind of mentality that you need when you're trying to get some progress on something. You know what I'm saying? You gotta change people's perception, because they don't know. But if you keep them just fighting, you ain't gonna get nothing. You ain't gonna get nowhere. I ain't gonna say when somebody disrespect you, you sit there and be disrespected. Hell no, you hit them back in the mouth. But at least when you bringing out the information in this book, a person, they gotta concede. And hopefully they have enough common sense to be able to see, damn, this thing is not this the way this thing is set up is not in my best interest. Well, unless you're trying to bring over your wife, your cousin, your mama, and all these people. And that's one of the main problems he talks about in the book too, which is chain migration. It's not just onesies and twosies. You know, you come over here and then you work and you go back, or you come over here and you get integrated as an American. No, it's chain migration. Folks bringing their whole clan, you know, and they get to build whole communities. And I remember growing up, it used to be you assimilate into the society. You know, you couldn't tell, you couldn't really tell like a person where they were from, because they wouldn't really, I don't want to say they were ashamed, but they would they would just try to fit in. Now it's just like, you know, they got a whole community. They got whole shopping centers with the characters of their language on the front of the building. So it's a different dynamic. But at the end of the day, again, this book is helpful because it allows you to be able to have a conversation in a way that's compelling and less confrontational. So get the book. That's all I got to say. Till tomorrow. Peace.
Indeed. Brother Ibrahim, you have anything you want to close out with, brother? Yeah, I don't know if Ibrahim is having any connectivity issues, but you know, we're gonna go in tomorrow night as well. We're gonna touch on some of the topics a little bit more. We're gonna go more into the middle and the back of the book. I kind of wanted to focus on the Genesis tonight. Josh focused more on the back of the book, right? The things that are basically affecting us today. And we want to make sure that we have not just an expanded discussion around this topic, but a repetitive discussion. This is something that needs to be repetitive. Barbara Jordan was all for immigration reform, and we need to be for immigration reform as well. And some of my policy prescriptions, they might sound a little bit harsh, but what's harsher than going through slavery, going through the horrors after slavery, right? It's one thing to be the slave. I think Dr. Darity notes this in his book, he and A. Kirsten Mullins' book, From Here to Equality, to be the property of one man, to be freed and be subjugated by the whole quote unquote white race. Subjugated. And we highlight this, not only subjugation, this public subjugation, but the atrocities and the horrors that have come with it. Only to have immigrants come over to replace you as you're trying to move up the economic ladder. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. I mean, it makes no sense when you really flesh it out. And when you're on the Twitter spaces, as I spoke to earlier, as Brother Ibrahim also spoke to, and you listen to these people, and on Clubhouse, this is a lot of people. These rooms, some of these rooms have 400 and 500 immigrants. I mean, you know, when they're taking polls, sometimes it's 400 or 500 people, 1,000 people. You go into a room that has 500 particularly black immigrants from Nigeria or some other African country or several other African countries, telling us that we're lazy and we're mad because they've come out here and outworked us. We did a space the other day where another immigrant by the name of DJ Academics, who does nothing but stir up conflict on his YouTube channel and has promoted drill music to the, to the effect that, and for those of you who don't know what drill music is, it's a form of rap music that speaks to strictly killing and then bragging about killing the person that you've killed. It's just the most was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Like, we didn't grow up with that music. Outside of the gangster rap of, as they called it, of NWA, we didn't grow up with that type of hip hop. We grew up with lyricism, people voicing or expressing the views that came from their experience in the ghettos that were created by this government through its system of redlining and segregation and economic exclusion, etc. You know, so we have a fight on our hands, and this fight is political. This is a political fight. Some people, they shy away from the political fight. It's not financially advantageous to them. Some people speak to the issue because it's financially advantageous to them in a way that sounds political, but there's no political solutions being pushed by these particular individuals. I don't know if Ibrahim is ready to speak, but I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll come back tomorrow night and have more of this discussion, because this is a discussion that needs to be had on the Be the Power channel. You just go back and look through our catalog. You'll see that we've touched on this topic of immigration several times, but we've never had the detail that we have now, to whereas we understand the policy that fomented the mass immigration that we see today, that's bringing in 1 million immigrants a year. Immigration is a problem to national security. War breaks out. If a war breaks out, how do you know that there's not sleeper cells being developed over here? Because they're looking at some Arabs, right? Russia is about to go to war with the Ukraine, which is going to eventually lead to American involvement, although they say Putin pulls some of the troops back. And you don't, what's the posturing for? What happens if they do go to war? How many Russians are over here? You know, I'm reminded of movies like Salt. Certain other movies. What was that other movie? Red something with the female that plays in the X-Men. And she's like this Russian agent in America. I mean, you know, I'm reminded of those types of movies. Engaging Black called the snitch music. You could call it that as well. You could definitely call it that as well. Who knows? It can be importing people that's trying to destroy the country from the inside out. Abraham Lincoln noted that if it not for the freedmen and their valiant patriotism during the Civil War, the Union would have been overthrown by the Confederate States of America, aka the rebels of the South. And what would have happened to America? Surely it would not have become the powerhouse that it is today. It's impossible. History gives us all the best indicators for those of you who study it. So, you know, I could go on for on and on and on and on and on. But I'm guessing something is wrong with my brother Ibrahim's connection at the time. So we're going to end it. Come back tomorrow, family. Make sure that you all click like on the video if you haven't before you leave. If you're new to the channel, click subscribe. We will be bringing more dynamic content. Also, subscribe to our other channel, BTP Media Group. I believe we're going to change that to the title of that to Freedmen. University over this next week. The new website is going to be up soon for usadof.org. New website for BETHEPOWER.org is being worked on as well. We working, family. We're working. We're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that we're just not going to put out in the public at the moment. We're working. So I'll leave you all with the motto of the platform, and that is, don't just fight the power, become the power. And then and only then will you have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.